All right. Hello, everyone. Hope you're having a good evening. If you can hear me, please give me a thumbs up or two. That would be helpful. All right, that sounds good. Sounds like I'm coming in loud and clear. Okay, I think this should be an interesting space. I want to talk about anonymity and the alt-right or the dissident right, as it now calls itself. And I think that, it's a very specific question, but it leads to a lot of other bigger issues. It leads to questions of infiltration, federal involvement, bad actors of all kinds. It leads to questions of, the status of things like Charlottesville or J6 and other related matters. And it might even lead to kind of personal questions about people who I've been talking a little bit about here and there, and some other people in this room have been discussing. I think someone like Frame Game might come up. And I will let, we already have 100 people. That's excellent. And I will let some of my special guests come in right away. But let me just talk, just to get the conversation started a little bit. Let me just talk about some of these issues. So for the alt-right, and that would include reactionaries, white nationalists, neo-Nazis, incel advocates, all sorts of different people. Anonymity is the name of the game. It is their MO. And I think they do that for understandable reasons. It's also the MO for a kind of parallel group or kind of mirror image or a dark shadow of something like the alt-right, which is Antifa. That's the other well-known group of so-called extremists who also engage in anonymity as their modus operandi. They, of course, they have an online presence, of course, but they're much more engaged in real world action than the alt-right. But there is something similar when you see, say, a Patriot Front march with mask, and they're not doing it for COVID, and say an Antifa protest also in mask. It is interesting. I think both of these groups are kind of outside of the mainstream, even outside of society, you could say. But then two groups that actually have had a tremendous impact on society and are in fact household terms. So we all know the reason why someone would be anonymous. And so this is kind of a charitable reading of the situation, but also a very realistic reading of it as well. So when the alt-right began was coming into public awareness in 2016, there would be a lot of mainstream news articles about me. I have always used my own name and face and voice. I actually have written under a pseudonym on a few occasions, but the most of those occasions were when I thought the article I wrote was really bad and I didn't want to be credited or blamed, as it were, for the article. So I've always wanted to take credit for things, and I wanted people to trust me, this is real, etc. And I think that's one of the reasons why I was made a kind of figurehead of the alt-right by the media, because after all, I was one of the very few people they could latch onto or talk to, etc. And the vast majority of the alt-right, let's say 99% of the alt-right, was in fact people who were on 4chan, on Twitter using avatars, on other websites. You didn't really know who they were. And I think that could inspire some good things. It can inspire some bad things. The good things. So it does protect you from being doxxed and facing any consequences. So after Charlottesville, there were absolutely examples of people who went to Charlottesville and might very well have gone there under the best motives. They cared about the statue. They wanted to take part in this whole thing, or they're Trump fans or what have you. And they just marched. They held up a sign. They participated in some way, and they get ID'd and fired from their job the next week, and they're SOL for a year. That's very bad. I think that's also extremely unfair and vicious and nasty. I mean, assuming this person did not engage in any illegal activity, I think that is totally shitty behavior. But would you put that past Antifa? Would you put that past even most liberal journalists? Of course you wouldn't. So that's a kind of good thing about it. The bad thing, of course, is that you don't have to really take responsibility for what you say. And that too can be good and bad. There was a lot of crazed hilarity about the alt-right of 2016 and 2017. And it was totally outlandish and silly and juvenile, but also kind of smart and in very interesting ways, and was kind of terrible and shocking and awful and execrable, etc. You know what I'm talking about. Some of those memes were pretty funny. Now they're kind of not that funny anymore, in my opinion. But a lot of them were just so over the top that you could not help but laugh. And would someone do that without the cloak of anonymity? Maybe not. Maybe to some degree. But does anonymity kind of add spice to our life? Does it increase discourse, or at the very least increase comedy and really outlandish political criticism? Yeah. But then there's this other aspect to it all. And that is a organization. I'll just mention this because I think we're all fairly familiar with it, and it's a little bit less controversial. So an organization like the IRA, so the Internet Research, the Internet Research IRI, Internet Research Institute. It's in St. Petersburg, Russia. If I got the exact name wrong, don't worry about it. They would go in, create profiles, and act effectively as trolls for a cause that was not named. So, there's an interesting book called This Is Not Propaganda that discusses a lot of this. It's a very mainstream book, but it's interesting details. There were some of these accounts that would fire up around the time of, say, the Green Revolution in Iran, and then they would go silent. They would gain a lot of followers by tweeting 100 times, and they'd go silent. And then they'd, crop up again around the Duterte campaign, and they tweet 100 times a day again and gain all new followers and kind of convert some of their old followers. But the thing about it is that this is clearly synthetic activity. It isn't just someone who needs anonymity because they've got a normal life, or they don't want the scrutiny or the headaches. This is actually a bad actor doing something. Whether they're promoting Russian interest, whether they're just stirring the pot, those are worthwhile questions. But they're soldiers of a cause that is not named. And I think that brings about a lot of uneasiness whenever you hear this. And I think this is also kind of taken to a new level with AI and similar things like that, where you might put out a tweet, let's say a tweet that's anti-Elon Musk. You're just making fun of Musk. And you get a lot of replies that are AI generated responding to you. And it's kind of like an electronic army that's protecting someone. I'm just using Musk as an example because I think this kind of thing really is happening, but it could happen in all sorts of different ways. It could happen on the platform itself. It could certainly happen from a troll farm, etc., where your mind is getting influenced. I mean, maybe these tweets, these reply tweets are kind of really nasty or whatever. Your mind is being influenced by foreign actors who are, again, not announcing themselves. They're doing this under some account with like a avatar of some housewife in Iowa, but they're actually in Russia or in Malaysia or Israel, etc. This is where we are, and I think this really is something that needs to be taken extremely seriously in terms of political activism, just kind of like a general psyop of the public and all sorts of things. I think it's something that really needs to be scrutinized with a high degree of seriousness. There's also another issue of the kind of entryist. And I've noticed this, and I'm thinking here of this fellow, Mike Benz, who at one point went by the name Frame Game. I also remember this person. I think I was even on a stream with him at one point, and in some ways I'm glad because I was disagreeing with him. John Mark and propertarianism. There are these figures, and they're anonymous. They come out of nowhere and then fade into nowhere just as fast. Out of the woodwork, back into the woodwork, and there's usually some common tropes to them. There's the anonymity, there's the kind of multi-level marketing style of discourse, or at least kind of coaching or team building. I remember seeing some of these videos of John Mark. I actually watched one this afternoon as I was thinking about this. It's well done. It's both kind of slapdash on some level, but clearly well done. He's wearing like a biker helmet. And he's like, all right, let me tell you guys, I've got two things that I want to teach you right now. This is how to understand leftist talking points. And by the way, go check out propertarianism. It's this marketing-based discourse. And I'm not even necessarily implying that that person was a bad actor, but it's at very least suspicious. And it's a little too good to be true. It reminds me of some of these videos that get passed around of like cute girls in the military, whether it's the American military, Israeli, or Ukrainian military. And they're making these kind of funny, relatable, self-deprecating TikTok style videos. But all of these videos are, in their own small way, psyops. They're either recruiting videos, they're either a psychological operation to get people on board with the campaign. How could you oppose the Israeli bombardment of Gaza? After all, these IDF soldiers are so hot. It's stupid when you say it, but that is absolutely what they're attempting to do. That's not new form of propaganda, and that is absolutely happening on all sorts of levels. So you have these entryists, these people like Mike Benz, as he is now calling himself. When he was involved in the censorship game, he's been around Elon Musk in many ways. He was just in Iowa chatting up Vivek. He came out of the woodwork in 2017. He did a lot of videos on Charlottesville. I apparently was on a stream with him at one point. I don't quite remember what we talked about, but that might be interesting if it's out there. He kind of came as like, I'm one of you. You see this with BAP and that sphere where they call people who show their face or use their name face fags. So apparently it is impossible, or face lords. So apparently if you sign off on something that you say or write, that makes it inauthentic. You're a fed. The true authenticity is when you wear the mask of anonymity. Now, I find that very, very hard to believe in most cases. Now, there are certainly some cases that might be true. A whistleblower, a guy who wants to, say things that, his boss wouldn't like. That's fair enough. But the ability for that kind of mentality to be weaponized and used to influence a movement, to turn it in a bad direction, to inspire civil war. I mean, John Mark, the person I mentioned with propagandism, he was all cool and slick. He was also talking about an actual civil war all the time, like, a neighborhood level, street level battle between right and left. He wasn't just analyzing that as a possibility. He was kind of predicting it in the sense of urging it on. So the mask of anonymity and the authenticity that is implied with anonymity in our age is something that absolutely can be weaponized by foreign governments, bad actors, all sorts of people. Mike Benz claimed that he was working with Jews, apparently, to promote Jewish causes. This was his excuse for being frame game a few years ago. Now, I don't know if I believe that, to be honest, but maybe it's true, maybe it's not. But it's very interesting that his explanation was it was a psyop, guys. Very curious, and it raises a lot of questions. So, anyway, I have been talking for about 15 minutes. I think I set the table pretty well. So, if I will let some other people up, and Ace, I know you have your hand up, but Ricardo, I will go to you first if you'd like to address some of the things I've said, or frame game in particular. You have the floor.
In thinking about this, I find it, in conjunction, you put out a tweet a few hours ago about sort of your role at the head. I mean, you were the head of the alt-right, right? And there was this movement that you got attached to, both, I think, willingly and sort of unwillingly. I think it was thrust on you, and you sort of, I don't know how you reflect on that, but that decision, or it sort of just happened, and I think that the algorithm, there's an algorithm that chooses to elevate and elevate different narratives that basically feed on existing friction points in society, like simmering resentments, and that's runs across the political spectrum. It's like, that force is just out there. I mean, that is social media, that is the internet age, and he who controls the levers of the algorithm control, like, what's promoted and what images are put in people's heads and things. And I think, like, the alt-right, I don't really know what the origin, was that grassroots that got harnessed. I think people like, I think people like Frame Games in that group, national conservatism, all this sort of, Zio, like, sort of the kosher right, have, they would like to take that pre-existing energy, harness it for their own ends. But like, I think that's the name of the game now. You know what I mean? That's what one has to do. I mean, if you're Lenin or something, if you're a revolutionary, an activist, you're constantly trying to ride a wave.
Yes. Yeah,
and I just think, like, I've become the problem. I mean, I don't know. I kind of look at this whole thing as I've become so cynical that, and demoralized, really, in that, like, I really have no idea, like, who's real and who's fake, and you get convincing arguments from both sides, and I'm sure I'm not the only person who feels like totally adrift, and I think all society's adrift, and I think there's an ideological storm where these all these ideological movements are bubbling up and basically in search of leaders to take advantage of them. And I think it's not that different than, all the changes that were going on about 100 years ago. And
Well, let me pick up on two things that you said. First off, the best opposition is the one you control.
right,
So there was a moment when the conservative movement was caught totally flat-footed by the then alt-right. And I remember there's an interview with Paul Ryan, and he said at some point, he was like, these alternative conservatives, or however they're calling themselves, they're a bunch of liberals and we don't like them. And they were just caught unaware, basically, of the impact of social media, I guess, in general, but
yeah,
also of a kind of young, edgy, crazy, in a good way, right wing energy that was behind Trump. And this was compounded by the fact that they were all in opposition to Trump, and yet Trump was winning. So it was kind of like the Ron Paul movement, but much worse. Like Ron Paul had a crazy online army back in 2007, even. So this in a way isn't new at all. And they would raise money. They would bomb the. I mean, not literally bomb, but go go bomb the debate polls, and so it'd be like, who won the debate, and it'd be like Ron Paul 85%, because basically all the olds were not online to vote for Mitt Romney or something, and all the youngs were online and they were spamming the Fox News poll. And it was crazy. It was, and I was even a part of that to some degree, but they were caught unaware of the power of this kind of thing. But then the best opposition is the one you control. So one thing that I have noticed among the mainstream right is that it is basically the alt right with just a few things removed or toned
yes,
down.
yes. No,
Like
I think that
TPUSA is like the alt right, basically.
yeah, no,
But like,
I think the
yeah,
things that were being discussed in 2015, 2016, 2017, that it's all one out on the right. It's I mean, at least the alt light, at least we would say, I think
yes,
has, I mean, plus a little bit more of a hard edge when it comes to like dealing with criminal groups. You know what I mean?
yeah,
But I don't know. That was the thing about the anti-Semitism thing when it came to frame games, like how people go. And I know there's people that are, after Mike Benz or digging into them. They really can't understand how an Israeli, how a Jew might benefit from promoting anti-Semitism. You know what I mean? And it's like, and it kind of
well,
like
I can
draws the
tell you
parallel with
how.
John Mark because Frame Games was pretty brutal, and he was like very, you guys need to deal with this. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It was very like that was his whole thing. And I will say, Duvid posted in the comments to this that he reminds me that the thing that Frame Game was really like came to speak to you on the stream that we did together
Hmm.
was like really about his whole program was promoting Saul Alinsky type tactics, right? Like basically minority mindset. He wanted white
Yeah.
people to like play the minority game. And that's kind of like, you think this is your route to winning, like you're losing by even playing it this way. Like you're admitting defeat. Like you're just joining the mat. Like you're just one of many instead of the cultural center of gravity.
Right.
And, you know,
I
I
don't even think that's a good strategy, to be
I,
honest. I don't.
absolutely not. No, no, no. Agreed. And I
Yeah.
think this is what I'm saying is that it was like it's self defeating in that you're just sort of, you know, frankly, it's like who are you putting in as the arbiter between all the races? Like who's positioned for that?
Yeah.
But um, I don't know. I think when it comes to this censorship stuff, our conversation earlier really got me thinking about what it means free speech in America is like. I mean, I can't really fathom. I think it is sacrosanct. I don't know if that's like my Anglo heritage or not, but I do think that it is a problem in that there is the ability for foreigners to act upon our political system, and there being no means of stemming that tide it kind of reminds me of like after September 11th, the appropriate response to me would have been deportations, strictly monitoring mosques, restricting immigration with these countries, okay, because of the risks.
Hmm.
Instead, we've had more immigrants from these countries after September 11th than before, and that got reached not that late soon or not that long afterwards. And
Hmm.
it's just mind blowing. Like that's the response. That's how you deal with um, these kinds of problems.
Yeah, well, let me take it in just a little bit of a slightly different direction, and then I'll go to Ace and Jeff, who have their hands up. But one thing that I noticed to focus on Frame Game or Mike Benz in particular, um, I had forgotten all about Frame Game. And I was a bit suspicious of him when he came in because he did strike me as a kind of multi-level marketer, I'm one of you guys type thing. And I wasn't really that enthused by it. I did watch some of his videos. A lot of those videos were recommended to me. He was clearly making an impact. People would DM me or text me like, "Oh, this is so amazing. He's bloated open," and I wasn't that impressed. But maybe that's just my own kind of ego or whatever. But um, when I've seen Mike Benz afterward, and I have watched um, a dozen or so videos of him talking about censorship, I've noticed this consistent theme, and that is to poo-poo notions of Russian collusion or foreign actors and focus in on it's the government and these blue-haired SJWs in on Twitter or whatever who are trying to restrict the free speech of conservatives. Now, look, I think that's to be fair. I think that's happening to some degree. I bet there is no doubt. Things have changed at X or Twitter, but there's no doubt that there was a kind of biased monitoring, and if someone made a joke about transsexuals, he was kicked off, and someone could call for violence for a left-wing cause and they're free, they get away scot-free. I have no doubt that that takes place. COVID compounded this, and I don't even want to go into all that kind of the medical aspect of it. But that being said, it seemed to me like Frame Game was just kind of like letting people off scot free. It was like, this is all about an attack on conservatives. And we need to, defund the FBI, stop all FBI contact with these social media companies so that we can have free speech. Because all it is, it's all a joke. Russian collusion, pfft, but it's these SJWs attacking conservatives. Well, the fact is, like, there is a lot of misinformation and pot stirring or shit stirring, let's say, done by foreign actors. That is a real thing. And it just struck me as he was kind of like opening up the front door to people who are going to distort discourse for their ends, under the banner of free speech or anti-censorship. And to just dismiss the whole concept of, the Russians, doing something, I think is just exceedingly naive. And this is not about anyone's opinion on like Ukraine or whatever, but when Putin was stationed in Dresden in the 80s, he was meeting with the remnants of the Red Army faction. So that is a outright terror operation. The idea that the Kremlin is, benign or like they would never, you know, lead people astray or something is just absurd. And like, if I don't know all of the things that went into, censorship, and I probably have an ambivalent opinion on like the Hunter Biden laptop and ivermectin or whatever and free speech. But you also have to like give somewhat of the benefit of the doubt that the FBI doesn't want, a Kremlin troll operation. And hopefully, I'm not as certain about this one, to be honest, but like, hopefully, they don't want Israeli operatives banning Palestinian voices or spreading misinformation or just kind of making people crazy online. I mean, hopefully, that's part of the national interest. And the idea that we should just stop all of that because of free speech, I just, I'm kind of past that at this point.
But isn't there a trade-off between globalism and domestic free speech? Is, it's like, how do we solve that problem while allowing ourselves to have free political speech? Because if we don't have it, I mean, I guess, like, I look at September 11th as TSA was foisted upon us because they couldn't really deal with the problem. They wouldn't just
Yeah.
get rid of Muslim terrorists or the population that produces them. And
Right.
so, now I know that we can't go. I mean, maybe we can. Like, we have to go all Juche in North Korea, shut off our internet, have a firewall the way China does about. And maybe that's where the door needs to be. We need to have a door at the border of our internet that watching outside so that we can be free in here. But the thing is like, it just seems like the alternative, and I'm not saying you're suggesting this, but like a Nikki Haley registering people and stuff. No, thank you. I mean, that's
I
I don't want.
understand. I am ambivalent about that. I'll just be honest, and I'm probably not going to make many friends saying this. Um, I don't know how to implement this, but I do like the idea of knowing that, it's kind of like one person, one man, one vote, kind of like one person, one account. This is your account. You are living in this country and you might be crazy. You might be dumb, but you kind of have the right to participate. But you don't have the right to like fuck with someone else's country by like in a bad faith manner poisonously spreading misinformation. And I don't know how to crack this nut, and I certainly don't want like Nikki Haley to be the one to solve this problem, but it is absolutely
But
a
I don't want
problem.
I don't want Donald Trump to solve it either, because
Yeah.
frankly, and I sort of touched on this a little bit. To me, Donald Trump he's really the opposite of what he professes to be. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Or he at least, like, he represents right. Represents Sheldon Adelson, right?
Yeah.
He's casino money and everything attached to that. And who are his interests? Now, I will say this. I think that what we're seeing when you say you see the conservative movement adopting alt-right talking points from 5 years ago, there is this syncretism that's going on, or that the American system has managed to do over time, where it sort of absorbs these movements without
Yeah.
breaking. It bends without breaking.
Yeah.
And sure, I have like a different vision of how I would like the alt-right, what came out of that implemented. But, like, is 80% of our program good enough? And that's the incremental change.
Yeah. I mean, there's no doubt that that has happened. And I think that's something we can talk about more. Let me go to some of the hands that are raised because people have been
Sure.
waiting for a
I'll
little
just
while. So, Ace, you'll go first, and then I'll go to Jeff, and then Name, and then May. Go,
Let's
Ace.
go. When you were talking about propertarianism, I
Yeah.
basically agree with your thesis in short, but I was assuming you were applying this to, like, during the 2017 era, when a lot of the sample and the dissonance was like IE and those kind of types, this kind of like Euro right inspired stuff in America. Um, would you put that in?
That hasn't caught on exactly, but I think the alt right culture has caught on with the mainstream. Where, I mean, just as as an example that's anecdotal but very quite telling. Like, there's some chick, for lack of a better word, who is on Twitter and was a kind of online ambassador for TPUSA. And there was some controversy recently about her like exposing the Talmud or whatever. So She's some girl. She's, cute looking. She kind of has that model look going, um, and Instagram model look going. But and she's not doing some things from the alt right of 2016, like racial issues or anything like that. They're kind of beating around the bush on those. But the idea that a Charlie Kirk organization was associated with this Instagram model who is, declaring that Christ is king and exposing the Talmud, I mean, that is kind of incredible. And it shows you where this is going. Like, I don't think the Christian nationalism thing was present at all in 2016, or it was on the margins, and it certainly wasn't present when I like attended CPAC in 2009 or something. And now, at least on Twitter, it is dominant, perhaps, or 50-50 or something, and that is remarkable. So, again, like the alt right kind of won. Like I didn't win, and a lot of the leaders aren't going to win, but the alt right as a kind of aesthetic and vibe and its talking points and its commitments even has largely won. And that in itself is interesting. And I'm just saying that as a fact. In many ways, I don't know. In some ways, I'm critical of it, but it just seems to be a fact.
So wouldn't that be like kind of it's being like these Barbie doll types are kind of becoming the faces by that
Yeah.
thesis of the alt-right. So it's kind of like not anonymous. It is coming into
Right.
the spot.
Well, yeah, sure. There are a number of, online personalities who are not anonymous. That's definitely true. But and you did see this beforehand. I mean, I think like someone like Lauren Southern was kind of a front runner, and she would, the alt right would do something and she would kind of like get out in front of it and be the face of it, while to be honest, not really generating it, and kind of water it down a little bit. I mean, I don't want to be too critical because she is nice, but that was her MO, and I think they're now like 2,000 cute girls doing that. So, well, whereas like in 2017 there were like two or something. Now there are 2,000. It's this is just my impression. But Jeff Giza, you've had your hand up for a little while, so you have the floor.
Hey, Richard.
Hey.
This is a great discussion. Thanks for having me on. I have a lot to say on these issues, but I think you really set the table effectively. Before going into some of the points about the anonymity thing, I'll just make one comment about the alt-right, which is Vivek, I think, is derivative of the alt-right. Like,
Yeah.
He's sort of the downstream personific product of the alt-right in some sense. I'm not personally a fan of his, but you can kind of see that dynamic there. In terms of the issues regarding anonymity, I think you really, like I said, set the table well. I think one way to view the Trump movement at the time, at least I saw it as an open source movement, and I think open source movements are great. They can be powerful. They're from the ground up. They're grassroots. But I think we also learned one lesson was the limitations of open source movements because they can be so easily infiltrated and astroturfed for all kinds of nefarious purposes. So looking back, you could see how, Russia and other countries could have, did astroturf, amplify, stir up, agitate, all of the above in the alt-right. And they've, by the way, I pinned a tweet from Elizabeth Dwoskin, her reporting they've gone on and done a playbook in Africa, interestingly, where they've applied, used information warfare and influence campaigns, whatever word you want to say, to do it there. So that dynamic of foreign influence and agitation is very real. And I participated in the DARPA disinformation work group. I was the one Trump supporter at the time. It's kind of weird, And so to be the And so I've tried to take the issue pretty seriously. And I think in a sense, you know, Andrew Morantz was right. I mean, he wrote that book about the limitations of free speech
Yeah.
and how it was being used against itself. And, you know, I believe passionately in the principle of free speech and free expression. But in practice, advocating for it now, I almost look at as people advocating for operating space for fuckery, really. Like, you know, no censorship is sort of like code for let me, you know, continue to astroturf. So there are some different tensions there. So the foreign influence thing is pretty real, and I think a lot of the groups that some people criticize, like the Stanford Internet Observatory, I think they actually do really good work. And there is a difference between the professionals in disinformation. They have blind spots too, and sometimes they're partisan, and the non-professionals in that who were kind of using disinformation for partisan purposes. And at the time, you know, several years ago, the water were pretty muddy. Now I think it's easier to tell the difference, at least for me, between the professional disinformation groups that are pretty earnest and operate in good faith, and ones that are kind of using the topic as a partisan cudgel.
Right.
Another dynamic that I wanted to point out is at the same time as the foreign influence stuff, people taking that more seriously, on the right, we saw an influencer business model rise up with like the Daily Wire, where, you know, there were scattered influencers, some of them you mentioned, you know, in 2015, 2016. And in 2018-ish, we started seeing people make kind of talent agency business models out of influencers. And they're domestic, but their funding may be, you know, who knows what their funding is. And I think those have had a bad influence on the right too, where like the Daily Wire, you know, it's just like all culture war, no substance, all this like performative clickbait, stirring stuff up. Like I'm really not a fan. And I think that's had a really negative effect on the right. And then, you know, the way that in disinformation circles, like the way that I've framed the issue, you know, in terms of solutions, is rather than framing it as like fighting disinformation, I think we should frame it as protecting authentic domestic discourse. That is, I'll just say that again, protecting authentic democratic discourse, right? Because that's what you're saying. Like the core principle that I want to live in a world where people can have different opinions, but like I just don't want to feel like I have to take a shower after I talk to a group, right? Because I don't know what the deal is with that person or this, and an anonymous person could be my neighbor, or that, you know, I kind of still get that feeling. I've you know, like PTSD from I think a lot of us have a certain emotional an emotional experience of being in that nonlinear information warfare kind of environment.
Well,
And
Jeff,
then
finish your point, then
I was
no,
just
no,
going to
you
make
finish,
one
and
other.
then I'll jump
Sorry,
in.
yeah, I'm kind of going on, but
No,
just
it's
one
okay.
other comment I would say is like there is this dynamic where everybody's turned into both a victim and a perpetrator, and you could see how like some narratives have been smuggled in that get up to Trump and Elon Musk, right? And then suddenly they're spreading memes that may have been planted by who knows where. You know, look at who Elon Musk interacts with on Twitter, who, you know, tries to interact with him. And there's this weird, I don't know, supply chain, or, you know, and then it's like, do I actually have cognitive security is the word that some people use. I don't really like that phrase. But do I have sovereignty over my own like mind and point of view? Like it kind of becomes a mind fuck very quickly.
Yes,
So
Jeff is a
I'll stop
master of
there.
these, of these like cognitive sovereignty or something. It's like, does it creep you out? That's what you mean. That's what you mean by that. Yeah.
No. There were people in the like NATO defense world coined a term called cognitive security, which was basically like, and at the time I kind of laughed at it, but and the term is silly, but the principle behind it was like, how do we protect our minds from being infected by, you know, foreign agitators trying to mess with our democratic discourse? Like that was the spirit behind it, which I think is a very valid concern.
No, it is absolutely valid. I was simply poking a little bit fun at the highfalutin name. But I mean, I think it's almost in a way worse, because all of the stuff that you described and that I described has already happened. And I think there's an almost like dystopian future of the internet that we're getting glimpses of now. And I guess I alluded to this a little bit earlier, but I noticed this thing, and I've noticed it less because I've taken time to like say I'm not interested in something. But it was one time, it was like a little bit low down on one of my tweets. There was a mention, and it was just this nonsensical, of sentence that was put forth. I can't even remember what it was, but it made no sense. And it was this like girl, like with big boobs in her avatar. And then I just went to her profile, probably for the reasons you can imagine. And it's just this like tweet storm of nonsense that is either produced by someone who does not speak English, or very well might be produced by some like primitive AI throwing together a sentence. And it's tweeting constantly, and it's this chick with big boobs. And there's almost, there's this like kind of paranoid schizo theory of like the empty internet, where the internet in fact doesn't have people in it. It's all bots. Like all your supposed friends on Facebook are just fake. And even this discussion right now is AI generated. And look, I obviously don't think that is happening, but it kind of is happening. I mean, that's like a horror movie version of what actually is happening, which is that I don't know the percentage, and it's probably higher for a larger, more famous account than my own, but like the amount of just weird AI gibberish being thrown out there. And then to make it even worse, could this occur on the level of the platform itself? I mean, Elon's using AI to do things like the For You recommendation, or some of the tweets that kind of, I don't know what they're labeled, but they kind of like, they're separate tweets that are somewhat related to something they're interested in. And that's kind of a good use of AI, you could say. It's in the algorithm, it's figuring out what you would be interested in, et cetera. But it kind of opens up this totalitarian door where, imagine, people get so hot and heavy about arguments, but imagine having an argument with a robot for 3 hours and like stressing out over it, and like your marriage gets ruined because you're yelling at a robot. I mean, isn't that it's both dystopian, a little bit comical, but then also like realistic. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you're right. I mean, I think the synthetic media, AI, it's going to shatter sense making. And so I think the question is, I'm not totally pessimistic about it. I think the question is like, how do we proactively take what we learned, including mistakes, right? Like what we've learned from the past, and apply that to the future. And I think, for example, labeling false, AI generated images and videos, I think that should definitely be a requirement. I can see both on the left and on the right, people battle testing, seeding out AI generated ideas. I mean, even like images of Trump in handcuffs, or images of Trump being crucified, like those are funny on a certain level.
Right.
They're really funny, but on another level, like when they're not labeled, I see them as kind of dangerous, because they create the like neural pathways that make it's like memeing something into reality.
Oh, absolutely.
But yeah, no, I think the whole synthetic media, I mean, clearly that troll knew your type of, woman. Clearly they figured that out, right? And in theory, they could like figure that out, and one-to-one messages like being done in the voice of somebody else that that's creepy. I don't know if you've played with like, what is it, something 11, I forget the service, but I cloned. I started this institute named after John Boyd, and I cloned his he's dead now, but I cloned his voice, and shocking how easy that is to do, right? And then
someone did that to me, and it was pretty good. It was, I could recognize that it's not me, but it was like me saying the hamburger meme or something, And
did it say put a bookmark in this?
yes, or it is what it is. When the rubber hits the road. Yeah, all the things I say a million times. Or just various baseball metaphors like, we got to throw a fastball or a curveball or throw it his head, but we got to throw a pitch. Um, uh, but yeah, it was this. I mean, look, it's one of those things where it's like 2 years from now, it's going to be completely accurate and indistinguishable, even to myself. I mean, we are very close to that point. And I mean, this is kind of like a broader discussion about AI. I think AI. I'm not afraid of like killer robots, but I do think that AI is going to just annihilate culture and thinking and art and things I think it is actually a huge threat to the point where I am a kind of AI doomer. I think we should just I don't know what to do. We need to just ban it or something because the degree to which it is going to degenerate thought among average people who no longer have to think, but it's going to degenerate thought itself because it's going to be, and this is what the New York Times lawsuit is about, I think, to the degree that I understand it. But it's the AI bot isn't really kind of like coming up with something new. It's finding a lot of things on the internet and kind of mashing them together and creating a complete sentence. Much like an AI art isn't like a painter imagining something that's never been painted before, drawing a unicorn. It's taking other people's art and mashing it together into something that is fairly original. And the problem with that is that AI art is now everywhere. I've posted AI art in my limited capacity, and it's going to soon be like, let's say it's 40% of the art. That means that the Xerox copier of the AI or the algorithm is making Xerox copies of Xerox copies. And soon you're going to make Xerox copies of Xerox copies of Xerox copies. And it's going to be dull and lifeless. And I think it's going to destroy culture itself. And yeah, sorry, I'm on a doom tangent here, but I do believe this.
Well, I think two quick points on that. I mean, one, for people on the right, I mean, they've got to move past this binary, censorship or free speech. It's not that simple. We do need content moderation, and we have to be proactive when, especially with the rise of AI stuff. And in fact, the disinformation people out there, I don't really like that term, but they could use people on like they need all different perspectives, right, in order to address the issue. And so, if people don't want it to be like a one-party system, then they need to claim a seat at the table. And then on the issue of the AI, I'm a little bit less doomerish. I'm more optimistic, I think. But I think a different way of looking at it is they'll put a premium on what it means to be human. Like I wrote an essay just in order to figure out for myself, like, how do you differentiate like writing?
I hope so.
Like no, I mean, so stuff that will go up like personality, mistakes, the human experience. Like I think it will call into question what it means to be human in interesting ways. In scary ways, right?
I know. What if you want the AI robot? I mean, I was actually trying to generate an AI on Shutterstock for just some kind of minor reason, and this AI they've integrated with something. I don't know, maybe it's ChatGPT or a derivative or whatever. And yeah, it was so polite. That thing, it was so much nicer than an actual human. See, that's the problem. People want like imagine if you're an incel or like a pathetic middle-aged man like myself, like wouldn't you almost want an AI girlfriend? I mean, it's
Let's go.
I think it's like I would almost answer it in the other way. I think it's very I think where we're going is it's not like it's not going to be Armageddon like 1980s sci-fi movies. It's like cultural destruction, and I think that's worse.
Yeah, I'm not as I'm more optimistic, but that's a good discussion unto itself. I did give my kid, I have a 6-year-old, and I gave him a children's like Alexa thing. It's like, it looks like a bird.
Mm-hmm.
And I went into his for Christmas, and I went into his room, and he was having a conversation with it.
I
I was
know.
like, that's wild. His actual first word was Alexa before even saying dad, because he heard me
Oh
when he
my
was a
God.
baby. Well, listen, well, hear me out first. Because we had an echo in the nursery, and I would say, Alexa, turn on white noise.
Yeah.
Alexa, turn off the white noise.
Yeah.
And because of that, he heard Alexa. So the first word was like, Alexa.
Wow.
All because I used it to turn on white noise. So I don't know if that makes me a bad parent, but I'll let somebody else speak. It's good to talk to you.
Yeah, good to talk to you, Jeff. I'll go to name and then I'll go to Patrick. So, name, you've had your hand up for a while.
Thank you. Thanks for having this space. It is an important topic, as we have recently exposed and seen some bad actors and foreign assets, agents, whatever you want to call them, in the Israel Hamas situation on these spaces. It's
Mm-hmm.
becoming quite problematic. But back to the frame game Mike Benz issue, I'll sort of work uh, backwards, I guess, from now till where it started. It is interesting when he came onto the scene as Mike Benz, and of course, no one ever heard of this person. He's lying about his credentials. He was given this State Department title, for the last 2 months of the Trump administration, but he never worked there. He was working for Ben Carson and HUD. I mean, he was a speechwriter.
Huh.
But anyway, as he came onto Twitter and started becoming the censorship expert and getting connected to people, having his profile sort of, amplified more and more, and making connections to the Twitter file censorship people, he actually got the department at Twitter that is responsible for investigating influence operations. He got the entire team fired.
Wow.
And the person's name was Aaron Roderick, and that office of Twitter's was in Ireland. And the guy had put out some sort of ad or posting that they're looking for an elections person to monitor disinformation or whatnot. And Mike Benz started this fear mongering campaign. And since he had previously gotten connected to the Twitter file people, Taibbi and Schellenberger, who talked to Musk, he got connected straight to Musk and got that whole team fired. And that is the team that would have, found out and exposed someone like Mike Benz or these foreign operators on the platform. So that is one interesting thing. The
Mm-hmm.
second thing I wanted to talk about is, okay, so why is he Mike Benz now, and what is he doing? Okay. So I could tell you from personal experience, because I only started this account because of the censorship issue and whatnot. And there's probably about 5 to 10 people that really dig in and research and discuss this topic on here. Like, that's all they do. He has connected with all of us over the course of the last year, including myself, and we all liked him in the beginning, but there was a common we all had something in common with Mike Benz. He would look at all of our work, all of our research, and he would, put his thumb on it and say, no biggie here, nothing to see here. And then for some people, he would steal their content and sort of, use his platform and twist, that specific censorship topic and focus, on some other issue, and try to take the focus off the more nefarious censorship deeds that had happened over the last 5 years. So
So he was
that's
doing
sort of what,
surveillance, basically.
pretty much,
Of,
he was.
yeah.
He inserted himself into that whole investigation, including Congress and the Weaponization Committee, and God knows what he's done with them, and that's dangerous. Okay, but that's what he's doing. Okay, and he's dumbed down, or to the extent tried to, the conversation on the platform here, and then goes and makes these appearances on these sort of independent media channels, and then gives his whole spin. I mean, he's good at that. That's why he does what he does, for whoever he works for. But we'll get to that next. But that's what he's doing now. Okay.
Yeah.
And the access, as you saw this now video with Vivek, I mean, he's connecting himself. He just keeps going up the chain, and he's getting connected towards political people, and this is very dangerous. This guy should not be allowed in another administration or having a government job. And I'll get to that in my next point, which is through my research of Mike Benz, because this is something somewhat new to me. Okay. But I researched him extensively for about 3 to 4 weeks. I dug up everything about him. And I wondered, okay, what is this guy doing? Both parents are still married after 40 years. He's got a brother, he's got a sister, typical, life growing up. He was into wrestling. Then he went to, got a degree, I think, in psychology. And then he went to law school, I think, at UCLA. And then he became a corporate attorney. But something happened in 2016, 2015, 16. Okay. He lived in Brooklyn. He met a Hungarian national in New York, and I believe he married this person, but it was a foreigner. And then the switch happened right
Susie
there.
is her name, isn't it?
Yes, I
Yeah.
believe Susie Antal.
What is her
I don't know
last
her
name?
last name. I don't remember off the
Okay.
top of my head. I can find it in a second, but yeah, I believe married her, and then everything changed at that moment. He quit his corporate job career. Claims, I watched all 200 of these frame game videos, but just to get the extent. And by the way, another reason that he put out of why he had frame games, he said it was a Jewish op run by Jews to whatever de-radicalize the
Yeah.
alt-right. No. It was highly radicalizing the alt-right. It was the opposite of what he said, from what I saw. But then,
her name is
just,
Susie Antal, by the way.
yeah,
Hey,
and her
Susie
background.
Antal.
I will say that frame game at that time, I mean, he was radicalizing on a certain level, but he also put into the discourse this concept of like the base Jew, and like there was some element of like what to do with like how does frame games fit in, and what does that mean for Jewish allies?
Yeah.
I mean, you remember like, Richard, you remember like Luke Ford, these types of guys,
Yeah.
like
Yes.
where do they fit in? Anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to clarify that.
So, I mean, there is some question on like how Jewish is he really? Like his dad is Jewish, his mom is Italian, she's not Jewish. So there is a question out there still, like, was he really raised with this, Jewish upbringing as much as he says he was? I don't even know. So now,
Right.
of course, as he was outed on Frame Game, all of his videos now, he has the Star of David necklace proudly displayed, most of the videos. But anyway, the last point I want to make is that switch from, corporate normal life, which could be a front, I don't even know, but that's what's out there, to now he marries a Hungarian national and then starts this psyop as Frame Game, says he was in the Proud Boys, and then randomly gets a job in the Trump administration. It's just all very, it's suspicious. And I'll just point to one last thing. There was an article written by James Bamford in The Nation. Okay. And he talked about, or is a really good article. It's called Why Israel Slept. It was written on November 2nd of 23. And in the article, it talks about this group, this meeting in Vegas. And basically it was Netanyahu and I believe Adelson, if I'm wrong. I don't know, Charles. But whatever it was,
Yes.
it was
Sheldon
Project
Adelson's
Butterfly. And it was a it was the Israel operation, Likud operation for social media. Charles could probably explain it better, but that's where I've sort of landed on what Mike Benz is. And I don't know where that fits into this whole censorship act that he's doing, but that's what I think it is.
That's fascinating, and I'll let Charles speak on this a little bit, and we'll go to Patrick, and then May, and then Hoplite as well. You guys have had your hands up. Yeah, I mean, I think I mentioned this earlier. I mean, there's really no contradiction between alt-right racism and Likud Zionism. You might even say that they're reinforcing of one another. The Americans get a little too racist and that, or too anti-Semitic, and that inspires some Jews to do Aliyah, and it reinforces the necessity of the state of Israel. I mean, there's a kind of reinforcing message there. I would note that Breitbart was quite literally founded in Israel, along with Bibi Netanyahu and the cast of characters of Andrew Breitbart himself, the guy who he had that blog. I'm forgetting its name at the moment. All of these people who were edgy right-wing conservatives who became Trump fans, and I would think it would be safe to say have spread some based memes and a little racism here and there and some misinformation on the side, but are, I would say, clearly dedicated to Israel as well. And again, the best opposition is the one you control. It's the one that gets a little bit out of hand, but not too out of hand, just enough, just right. And I do think that there's an interest in fostering that, in fact. And it's not, you're not all Jews are like your average New York Times reading liberal who's very sophisticated and would freak out at Breitbart. They think Breitbart is about to, launch Hitler 2.0 or something. Not all Jews think like that. A lot of Jews are much more connected and keyed in with the American right. And that's just a reality. I mean, we would not have Breitbart. We would not have, even its kind of successors like the Daily Wire, et cetera, without this connection to people who are dedicated to the Zionists. These are not entirely contradictory. And also national conservatism. I mean, that's Harzani, from what I understand, actually even has, what is it, Kahanist, is it a Kahani Kai? He has these radical kind of Jewish Defense League, like Israeli nationalist roots, which is, all fine and good. But it is interesting that there's the, installation of a group like that that's trying to kind of take some of the thunder from the alt-right, take some of the thunder from the paleo-conservatives, and it's basically succeeded in replacing both because it's better funded, it has some senators speaking there, et cetera. It's kind of replaced both as an alternative intellectual force. But it's also something that is going to guide things back in very important ways with regard to Israel. And I just think that's something we should keep in mind. But Patrick, you've had your hand up for a while, if you'd like to jump in.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Richard. Yeah, I mean, AI arguments aside, that's an interesting discussion, and you brought up yourself, Richard, and others brought up some very good points on that. But just putting that to the side for a moment, the issue of free speech. I'll just say up front, I'd rather myself deal with the marketplace of ideas than to hand the power of policing speech and thought to corporations, big tech, and the state. That's just my personal preference there. I know I'm not alone in that, but I know there's a lot of people that feel otherwise. But I would say push back on what Jeff said and the underlying premise of it. much of which was an outgrowth of the 2016 election, and Russiagate, which we now know was completely bogus. It was a completely fictitious narrative that's turned out to be a hoax, a very expensive hoax, and no doubt a hoax that provided the underlying support for the proxy war in Ukraine.
An
But
Israeli hoax. by the
well, yeah, could could very well be as well. But so what happened was that there was a mass suppression of speech on this platform and right across the meta platforms, Google, YouTube. Okay, a massive suppression, authentic discourse. And the Stanford Internet Observatory is just indicative of one of those cutout organizations that was formed as Facebook divided and conquered across academia, big tech, and government. And they're not the only ones. There was another version of this at University of Washington, which actually was the forerunner of all of it. So what this allowed, that massive censorship of which I was a victim of. I was off this platform for a year and a half under Jack Dorsey. That allowed the astroturfing right to totally colonize and occupy the information space. That was at that time when the Daily Wire exploded. That was amid all of the deplatforming that came in waves from the 2018 midterms to the 2020 election to COVID, the vaccines, etc. That allowed the Ben Shapiro's, the Jordan Petersons, this kind of monolithic, which I think is more of an arm of the mainstream establishment that was given independent motifs to sell to a kind of confused mainstream audience. That's kind of the market that they moved into. So that actually happened. J6, there was also a massive deplatforming and purge after that. So that allowed all these sort of fake alternative or right wing media brands and personalities to totally dominate the space and kind of monopolize it and drive the discourse or to gaslight the population on a number of big issues, which we're now seeing the results of this, especially in the last 100 days. So that colonization of the information space was all revealed in the Twitter files. And this revealed a disturbing convergence of corporate and state interests. And you could say from that was kind of an orthodox phenomenon of modern fascism. So that actually happened, and I was in the Twitter files. I was I was I was deemed by the State Department with, I don't know, 70,000 followers at the time, 50,000 followers as a Russian bot. So and I that was revealed by Matt Taibbi and others. And of course, I'm a human being. I had a verified account in 2017 or something, but it didn't matter because that's the way the system was running at that time. And I
No,
wasn't alone, of course.
what we learned though, of course, from that whole period is that many of us that were put on blacklists and whatnot were put there by Israeli interests or by their allies within the U.S. government. And I think that the degree to which the Russia hoax was an outgrowth of the Zionist takeover of the Trump presidency, I think needs to be understood. And the same thing has been happening in our tech platforms. We see the degree to which the Israelis assassinate smart Palestinians who could basically form the precursors or form the core of a Palestinian state. The same thing is happening in the United States, where they're targeting the families of people who had connections to the American founding or whose families are connected to the intelligence services in this country. There's a long history of this, of Israeli misbehavior in this way. And what's starting to happen now is different countries in our alliance are fighting back. And I'm very proudly working with those allied nations to out the Israeli bots that are on this platform and the Israeli people that are on this platform. And I think that will be a very important thing to look at going into the 2024 election cycle.
Yeah, Charles, part of the phenomenon, what you're describing there is knocking out future leaders, knocking out leadership
Yes,
out
it's
of.
without. I mean, I know because I have some Mossad friends that the IDF in particular has been targeting Americans here, and I know Richard and I are on that list. because I actually have a copy of that list, which I was provided by some people within the Senate Intelligence Committee. And so, yes, just as there, a logic of the internet has been monopoly, right? And this idea that in a trust-like environment where we're building trusts rather than kind of the antitrust arrangement that we have now, there are whitelists and blacklists, right? And we see that with Shapiro cozying up to Mark Zuckerberg to suspend voices that are critical of, Zionist behavior, and so you can see this with the basic idea is to kind of turn us all into Palestinians or Uyghurs of different forms, and that I don't think it's a coincidence that we see a lot of the tech people have an experience living in apartheid South Africa, right? And there's this sort of desire to have a kind of technological apartheid that targets intelligent people that could form some form of resistance to them.
Well, yeah, it's interesting, Charles, as well. In the UK, this kind of revolution mainly through third sector organizations like Common Purpose to infiltrate and go is like a long march through all institutions to disrupt and to get rid of potential future populist left wing and right wing, by the way, not just any particular wing, but there is a kind of there was a kind of a Marxist ideological preference within the leadership of that group, and they transformed and flipped the Labor Party. And look at the Labor Party
Yeah,
now.
there's a
Look at
long
it.
history of this, right? Of the ADL doing this sort of work, right? You have the history of them targeting civil rights groups in the 1960s. Certainly, when the ADL was sued, it was revealed in the 1990s that they were targeting all kinds of groups that were, so-called extremist groups, so on the left and the right. And in many cases, what was interesting, if you really study the history here, is how many white nationalist groups, how many neo-Nazi groups are actually run and controlled by Israeli actors and agents.
Yeah, the Southern Poverty Law Center, the
Oh yes, although the
ADL.
Southern Poverty Law Center in recent years has been flipped, is my understanding, and there's a degree to which the intelligence services in the United States and other countries actually clean up a lot of these groups, and they try to clean up various companies as well. And so you're kind of seeing that go on, where Facebook, we get rid of a Sheryl Sandberg, whose parents were known to the British government to be Israeli spies, right? We get rid of a Sheryl Sandberg and we replace her with a Nick Clegg, who is the liberal Dem, leader in the in the House of Commons, so under the Cameron government, right? So I'm more optimistic about this, but I have definitely linked up with other NATO countries, and there's a desire to kind of topside a lot of these operations and influence operations. I think it's critically important to understand, like Mike Benz is paid. He's paid by the Home Depot billionaires. What's his name? Bernie Marcus and all the money around that. And so that's very much a part of this as well, which should be understood. So
The other thing is along with the Daily Wire, you have like on the intellectual side, Richard, you might comment on this, the intellectual dark web. And
Yes.
if you look at who comprises the IDW, and so they kind of marshal the consensus within that key demographic, by the way, which is men like, let's say, 24 to 42, and they did a very good job of shepherding that demographic over the last couple of years. And now look at the pinnacle of this will come at October 7th, where you have Jordan Peterson. These are all people boosted by Elon as well, Ben Shapiro, Eric Weinstein, Brett Weinstein, some of whom came to dominate the COVID freedom movement.
Yeah.
Then you have the foreign policy discussion dominated by Shapiro, very pro-Israel. So I found that very interesting, Richard, that intellectual dark web, because there was kind of a non-IDW in the early alt-right days, which I viewed really as an intellectual arm of that was exploring ideas that were not being talked about in mainstream Republican or conservatism very early on, like 2012, 2013, 2014.
Oh yeah, the kind of when I was a part of it, yeah, definitely. And 10 years ago, I mean, the IDW was also, I mean, not that the individuals weren't legitimate in themselves. I mean, Jordan Peterson was a long time clinical physician and lecturer, etc. Obviously, uh, oh, I'm forgetting his name, the atheist.
Sam Harris.
Uh,
Sam
yeah,
Sam
Sam
Harris.
Harris. I knew about him back in 2003 when he was writing atheism books, etc. So they were legitimate people, but the whole notion of this internet dark web or intellectual dark web was created synthetically by the New York Times and what is affected like a puff piece
No, by
written
Barry
by
by
Barry
Barry Weiss.
Weiss.
By
Yeah,
Barry
of like,
Weiss,
look, you.
and of course coined by Eric Weinstein, who
Yeah,
people will recall my outing of him in these spaces as a kind of con man, and of course lied about being a hedge fund person. I mean, the piece that I posted up top goes into all the fraud around his career, and these are intelligence services, or intelligence linked people, particularly tied in with the Israeli defense forces, which we see time and time again.
yeah.
So, and I don't think it's a coincidence. I mean, Palantir, just had their board meeting in Israel, right? And we need, Palantir, Peter Thiel, who many of us in the space know, he was a patron to Eric Weinstein for a great number of years until he was sort of forced to get rid of him. So,
Yeah.
I would just, I
Also,
would,
just a real quick thing on this. I do want to go to some other people who've had their hands up patiently waiting, and Juvid as well, I think, has some perspectives on this. The woman I mentioned earlier, Susie Antle, is now married or dating John Bacchus, who
That's
is some
correct.
kind of Teal fellow. So um, she
and
gets
financially
around.
backed by Teal at Palladium as well. There are photos of them together. So yeah.
Yeah,
She broke up
remarkable.
with Mike and apparently started having an affair with that guy right after he left the Trump administration. Interesting.
Very interesting. May, would you like to
By the way,
jump
this is
in
true
here?
of Amanda Milius too. Amanda Milius was dating an Israeli guy for quite a long time during her time in the Trump presidency.
Interesting. May, would you like to jump in?
Hi, sure. Well, the conversation's kind of changed since I requested, but I agree with most of what has been said here. There's definitely psyops going on. I put a tweet in the jumbo that kind of sums it up really well. It's like you'll see an account, you'll think, oh, this person's just like me. And then you find out they're from another country and
Yeah.
they don't even have anything in common with you at all.
Yeah.
That's all I wanted to say.
Excellent.
It is interesting how Nick Fuentes has kind of survived in a way that neither you nor I really did, Richard. I find that very telling, right? Like the fact that Netanyahu has to publicly call out a Nick Fuentes is very interesting, and yet they didn't quite succeed in canceling him.
They have. Well, I don't think they've canceled me exactly. I mean, I'm still
I would
living
say
and
that,
breathing.
yeah, but
Richard's still alive.
there was a period where basically like all of these publications that had some kind of like weird Zionist tinge to them would be like effortlessly, breathlessly covering, anyone that was like alt right adjacent or
Yeah.
alt right, and that period has kind of gone away.
Yes.
Richard, I was wondering if, and Charles, if you want, if we can talk about that Project Butterfly and other Likud operations, and maybe if how Mike Benz and relates to
Well,
that, and
yeah. I
then
mean, why
maybe
don't
others.
you go into that a little bit?
Well, I was hoping Charles, if you want to,
Oh,
he could
okay.
probably
No,
speak better.
why don't you go first, name, and then I'll kind of tag team off of you, and you can kind of go into
Well,
some.
I was like what I said earlier. This I put the article up in the nest. This article written by James Bamford for The Nation talked about this meeting in Vegas that was super secret, I believe, back in 2015. And it was led by Netanyahu, the Likud party, and they put together what they called Project Butterfly, which was, according to the article, aimed at executing intelligence and influence efforts against Americans by creating an infrastructure for narrative warfare, alternative messaging, and negative platforms. So that's, and I believe the article said they raised at least 50 or $100 million that day, or in the following days that, after that meeting. So I don't want to say that's when it all started, but as far as the influence operations online is probably because, I mean, social media became more obviously popular, from the Trump years on, probably 2015 until now. It's like whatever, where everyone gets their news or goes. So it only makes sense that the influence operators are going to sort of shift from mainstream media, which they're still involved in, obviously, to really invest in social media and running these operations. And we see it alive, big time right now in the Israeli Hamas conflict.
Yeah, I think, by the way, so there are those of us building databases of these people in retaliation, and you can kind of see the outing of some of their assets online. Like the existence of accounts like Stop Zionist Hate that are kind of exposing some of these things. Like there really is a pushback that's going on, and increasingly law enforcement is getting involved, which I'm very happy about, which I think is long overdue. There's sort of been this attitude that the Israelis can effectively commit espionage and blackmail and harm people in the United States without any real pushback. So I think that that's kind of a good thing about the Biden presidency. I would say, I think the fact that there are no Republicans anymore that are publicly Israel skeptics is very interesting and kind of disturbing in a lot of ways. And the degree to which, Biden is still going along with, arguably a genocide taking place, in Gaza is kind of a tell that we have a long way to go before we really rid ourselves of the Zionist influence.
Yeah, to say the least. So I'll go to Hoplite and then Duvid.
Go.
Oh,
Hey, what's up, Richard? Big fan.
hi.
Sorry to get off a little topic. I was curious, why was Patrick Casey accepted as a conservative when his past was like literally identity of Ropa?
Well, that's interesting. I don't know the degree to which Patrick Casey is doing anything. Is he still around?
I think he's at one of those like Chronicles or something. One of the like paleo.
Well, is he working there, or is he writing?
No. I think he contributed, but I think he just does his show, like a YouTube podcast.
He's definitely shilled by like the BAP sphere.
Oh, that's very interesting. Yeah, I mean, he was a very odd character. I don't know if he is connected to anything deeply sinister, but he's one of those little kind of sociopath types that clings on to someone and then kind of backstabs them. So he just kind of emerged out of nowhere. I think his original handle was what is it, Reinhardt, Operation Reinhardt or something? It was some Reinhardt Wolf, some extreme 1488 account. And then he went to IE and he did the kind of optics war of like, oh, we're this American group and we're conservatives and we love liberty and all this kind of stuff. And then he dropped that before the election for reasons that I don't quite understand. And he was then kind of glammed on to Nick Fuentes and then kind of betrayed Nick Fuentes at the last minute. It was just this kind of like very clear life pattern. I mean, one thing in the sense of like, why is he writing an article for Chronicles? I mean, first off, I'm not interested and maybe even too lazy to write article for Chronicles, but
so that's why is Chronicles still a thing? I didn't even know that.
Apparently they are pretty active. Pedro's not on the payroll anymore.
Pedro got exposed. Yes, old Pedro. So I think the reason is that he's just not very famous because he's just this, or infamous. He's just this kind of like weird kid hanging out in the background, and so he can kind of get away with it. I think that's the simplest explanation.
I think a lot of this stuff too is that people have control files on people. So like the Israelis in particular do this, or some of their actors, where they'll know people's more edgier commentary and they'll record you in these spaces, and then
Yeah.
they'll kind of deploy that on you in different ways. If you get out of line or you say something against the Israeli threat.
Yeah. But he's there.
Well,
Duvin, you wanted to
oh,
jump in?
sorry. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, thanks, Richard.
No, you
Thanks
can
for
go.
doing this. Glad you got a big audience back. I was on that Frame Game stream with you at the very end, and a few others, like with Richard Gage and Handsome Truth when he first started the Goyim Defense League with the Bundle Cast.
Yes.
I wanted to mention.
Do you have this stream?
I mean, yes, Ricardo. I mean, he has them, but we'll see what.
Dude, I have it, but I'm never putting it back out there. It's like I had to change my identity. I'm not going.
If you remember, he had to take out a hotel room because his wife was so upset that he hosted a stream with you.
Oh, okay.
The Frame Game,
I
the
do
Frame
remember
Game stream,
that.
like he had to, it almost cost him his marriage.
I'd really like to watch that.
Well, I'll talk to you, Ricardo. I mean, it might be interesting to release it with you totally taken out of it, but I don't.
It's not that interesting. There was a mentioning, I mean, because Kristen Ruby's here and she's done a lot of research, but I think that Kristen had found a tweet that I put out years ago, and I think to look at Frame Games as somewhat a precursor to QAnon. One thing to mention, he had a few different things that he did. One thing, he was trying to sell like Saul Alinsky tactics to white nationalists, which was largely a failure. He also was one of the precursor people talking about the Great Replacement. I mean, he was probably, actually at the time, even when you were the head of the alt-right, he was probably the biggest name regularly pushing, in other words, the Great Replacement. And he also was almost prophetic in giving over like inside information of what the leftists were doing, because he's a former leftist, brought up with a Jewish education, went to Ivy League schools, and like the John Francis Greppi, and he had the whole Starbucks, basically the DEI. Like he was talking about what was coming, the DEI, and how all that stuff was it was coming, and he was almost prophetic. Like he laid it out almost exactly like it would have happened. But I was thinking the angle. I mean, some of these other people look like they've done a lot of research, and like you could psychoanalyze the guy or guess what his angle was, who was maybe backing him. But he was the most credible of the anonymous people. Like he was actually QAnon, in the sense that a lot of people are anonymous for different reason, but he gave this aspect, like he's a sympathetic insider who's giving this inside information to the general public because the government. I mean, there was even before QAnon, but I'm not sure if you thought about that as like Frame Games is basically the precursor. And if you think of January 6th compared to all the the QAnon charlatans, Frame Games is really, I would say he was the actual QAnon. He was the only one who was actually giving good inside information that was useful.
You seem highly sympathetic towards Frame Game.
Well, I disagree with him a lot. I mean, generally, I was an anti-racist, so like in pro-multiculturalism. So, he was on the side of kind of like racist Jews, and there were a lot of racist Jews that were sympathetic to the alt-right or your movement at the time, anti-immigration. Even at that time, the Israelis, you were like the white Zionism you wanted to do in America, like Trump. Oh, what the Israelis are doing. I mean, even Vivek Ramaswamy had said that, but
And Duvit, could you share? There's this. I shared that Ella Malding thing with you, and you were saying how like these kind of characters. And Richard, I shared with him. There's all these like female accounts that are popping up like out of nowhere. 20-year-old girls like reading 4chan, like what amount could be like a 4chan post about.
God forbid. Like, I mean, to put it, because you have a lot of anti-Zionist people here, but to say that like if it's a Zionist conspiracy promoting white nationalists, that basically they're promoting these so absurd anti-Semites that can't even be accurate, to make it look like anti-Semitism is so bad that the ethnic cleansing, possibly genocide in Gaza, is justified. So it's like, who are all these crazy counter-Semites? And I don't know if you remember that stream where Handsome Truth came on to you and he tried to convince you, that was years ago, or Lucas Gage, and the different paths. But like now, just the over-the-top counter-Semitism, are these people actually real? And if it is some sort of Zionist psyop, the goal of it would be to make it look like anti-Semitism is so bad that what Israel is doing in Gaza is justified, and possibly even for the likelihood that what Israel is going to do is going to get worse. They are actually going to do an ethnic cleansing. There, the Wall Street Journal's article just this week that they do plan on taking over the Rafah crossing and possibly forcibly expelling the Gazans into the Sinai Peninsula, and therefore they have all these psyops of these over-the-top anti-Semitism that's going to be used to create sympathy in the American public.
Right. Oh, I think that's definitely the case. Remind me who Handsome Truth was. That also
He
rings
founded
a
the
bell,
GDL,
but
and then he moved IRL. At the time.
He goes around with flyers of like
oh,
the
he's that
Jews run the
guy.
Yeah, but at
media.
the
Yeah,
time
yeah.
he was
He
on
was
the stream, the Brundlecast
like
with you.
Patrick
He was
Little.
just a
He was like
small
Patrick
YouTuber.
Little.
He
Yeah.
he is kind of
Yeah,
like
I'm
Patrick.
talking like
Very
5 years
high
ago
crap.
at the time. Like he was on it was on Thanksgiving, and it was just a 8-hour stream on Brundlecast, and Halsey was on there, and Lucas Gage, and we had some other smaller names. A lot of people really liked you.
Quite the eclectic group.
But yeah, he was just
Yeah.
a small time YouTuber troll at the time before he became the biggest IRL. And at the time, like Halsey had his conspiracy theory that he thought HT was controlled opposition that was paid for by Tom Steyer. That if you remember the conspiracy at the time, that HT was controlled opposition funded by Tom Steyer. But whoever is funding him, that's like this over the top comedic anti-Semitism that keeps on being promoted in the media and the ADL, largely to justify what Israel is doing and might plan on be doing.
Right. Interesting. Ace, do you want to jump in? Then I'll go to some new people as well. Jack Brand and Pax 2 over here.
Sure. Just to go back to what was said earlier, do you because I know Aaron McIntyre kind of has a similar arc with coming from like an NRX pipeline and then onto Blaze. Would you kind of see that as just kind of a natural shift, like Tucker saying more edgier things? Like there's probably not a conspiracy to explain that. That's just kind of naturally where a lot of these.
No, well, I think conservatives are really naturally boring people, and they cannot come up with an idea on their own. And it's kind of like almost antithetical to their worldview, like novelty or innovation or daring, or so it's just not in their DNA. And so yeah, it is very interesting that like Ann Coulter in 2016, she sounded a lot like VDare in 2003. And
she cites VDare like in her book, which is kind of
right.
funny.
Yeah, and she's just doing these things that are now no longer really relevant. I mean, it's like if immigration reform needed to happen, it needed to happen like 30 years ago. And she's now like, whoa, we won't have a country if we don't do this. Like, it's all this just weird, it's like fighting the last war. This is something, I've said this before, conservatives are always warning about something that's already happened. Like I think Chronicles is like warning about.
Damn, that's good. Damn, that's good.
The Chronicles magazine is like warning about an incipient Protestant Reformation that's just around the corner. Like if we don't watch it, something like that's going to happen. It's a very curious mindset, and so all of these people, like I watched the debate 2 nights ago, hosted by Elijah Schaffer with Nick Fuentes and a King, I guess his name, and Gavin McGinnis. And, it's a fairly interesting debate. But even someone like Elijah Schaffer, I mean, he's just he's like a 2016 shitlord. And he doesn't do all of it. He'll kind of dial some things back, but it's there. He's just coming out of that milieu. Like it's all this like, it's a very strange thing. Now, I would also imagine that, and I don't know this for certain, but I would also imagine that he would never give me the time of day. Like if I called him, I doubt he would answer the phone.
I don't know. He might. You never know.
Okay, fair enough.
He's changed quite a bit. He's changed quite a bit.
I don't really want to call him, to be honest. But so there's this weird thing of like, the alt-right winning, while like any thought leader, and I know this sounds a bit self-serving, but like any thought leader who was actually out on a limb or kind of taking their lumps or like pushing things forward, they get knocked off and opposed. And then 5 years later, all of these people just adopt the talking points. I mean, it's just
Well,
so obvious.
Well,
I
yeah, it's
don't.
like Charlie Kirk's coming out next week with the MLK documentary. It's
But
like, welcome to
but
Yeah.
2016.
yeah, Sam Francis comeback tour.
Yeah,
I
but
saw
Sam
this,
Rich,
by the
Francis
way.
did
how
that
That's
in the
Charlie Kirk.
90s. I
So
mean,
I
I
saw
mean,
this, by the way, when I did a bunch of stuff research on Obama and how Obama's there was this book about Obama being gay, and I like quoted it, put it up on my Substack, and then like a month, 2 months go by, and then it's like in Tablet magazine where they're like interviewing the author and trying to make like this weird Israeli take on the Obama gay stuff. And yeah, there's like this process whereby the people who identify the trend or the people who support the trend or who actually have like the actual thinking on the right, they get sort of removed like very quickly, and they
mhm.
get their ideas stolen. They get shut out of book contracts. They get shut out of technology funding if they're technologically adept. There's this sort of like thieving that goes on, and a lot of it has a kind of Zionist tinge to it. I mean, we just have to be honest about that. Just
That's
Yeah.
part of Project Butterfly, where it says that its purpose was to damage specific Americans and U.S. organizations associated with, these certain anti-Israel. I mean, it was sort of, surrounding the going after people that were pro-Palestinian or trying to expose that Israel's as an apartheid state. They would go after those people or organizations. They would develop ways to disrupt their activities, lead them to be falsely investigated by authorities, and then run these media influence campaigns against these people. This is exactly
Yeah,
a
and by the
full.
way, I've seen this with myself now in many different places where I show up. Like I was in Missouri of all places recently, and the IDF cell that was there was activated against me because I was having like lemonade with a state representative who is running for attorney general in Missouri, which is a very pro-Israel state, a very pro-Zionist state, I guess. So yeah, I think there's something going on here, which is there are these organized defamation squads that have some connection. Some of them are like pro fifth columnists within the United States. So they, like maybe a Clarissa Goldenberg would be an example of this, where she's sort of more Israeli than the Israelis, right? AKA Stealth, or there are other examples that we could kind of go to, but basically there's a group of them that are kind of controlled in many cases by like one central figure. So like if you look at like who is that vaguely homosexual guy who was living in Romania, Andrew Tate. Andrew
Yeah.
Tate, had a controller, and that controller was this kind of guy named Iggy Semmelweis was the name that he went by. So there's this kind of like proliferation of these weird cults. And if you look at like Gavin McInnes, before he did the Proud Boys, he was like, oh, I went over to Israel, was involved with that. Gavin McInnes's brother like lived in Israel for a
He said,
spell and
"I'm
was
I'm a Nazi, but for Israel," is how he described
yes.
himself.
Well, and of course, there's this like larger history
for
here.
for
There's a
optics.
larger history here of like how the Likud party had all these connections with former Nazis, right? And yeah, there's a connection here of like the FPO party in Austria, started by former Nazis. I mean, there's a lot more of the Nazi Israel history than is like allowed to be talked about in the United States, but of course, other countries talk about it quite openly, including in Israel itself. So it's just, to me, the question is, how long will this go on for, right? Like that's the big question. Like who will be the first Republican to like call for a ceasefire, or like will all the Palestinians be exterminated before that happens? I mean, it's really an interesting question. I mean, putting aside the humanitarianness of it all, like how many children in Gaza have to die before a Republican will show moral courage?
Well, I mean, do you want me to answer that rhetorical question?
Yeah, answer it actually. Like I'm curious, do you think all of them?
An
Like do you think
infinite amount of babies. Yeah, the Republicans are not going to do this
Yeah,
ever.
if you want to go back to the basis of when you had your alt-right kind of white Zionism, it was even Vivek Ramaswamy or Trump was like, that's what he wants to do in America. That's what they want to do on the southern border. So, I mean, the Republicans are more like,
Yeah, it is quite telling too how many of the companies that the Republicans want on the southern border are Israeli companies that were involved with the fence in Israel that all failed, like Elbit Systems and all that. So it's kind of
Mm.
funny in a weird way. Like they want to import the Israeli technology, which they say is super great for security, but which failed allegedly on October the 7th. It's a fascinating kind of thing.
Hmm. Absolutely. Let's go to some people who haven't spoken. Um, actually, I hold on, Zag. Do you want to let some people? I guess I can't add more people because we're full.
I see we've got room for one more person.
Okay. Why
I'll
don't you
drop down.
take the reins?
By the way, I see William Turton is here, and he did a rather great piece on Rumble and the SEC getting involved with Rumble, which I think is a very important story, which I commend everyone's attention. And I think there's some interesting details there because David Sachs, again, a weird guy, a Jewish guy born in South Africa, involved with Rumble, was a huge donor to Hillary Clinton, but then curiously is now anti-censorship and was like a big donor to the American Conservative magazine. So a very interesting article in Wired magazine, which I commend to your attention.
So are people getting worried about that in Rumble,
Yeah,
or
I
is
mean,
the
the
SEC?
SEC is going hard against a lot of these companies in all sorts of interesting ways. So we'll see as time goes on.
What is their issue with them?
Effectively, the SEC's not saying what the real reason is, but through back channels, the issue is Rumble, in particular, acquired a company called
Hmm.
Locals.com, which is an Israeli founded firm. And it's a way of moving money to their various assets in social media, a kind of like anti censorship, way of giving people money. Because what happens is that when a lot of these people are outed, they're then blacklisted by the payment service companies because they're effectively acting as unregistered foreign agents. And
Richard,
so
not to interrupt, but Kristen Ruby, I know she's here, and her theory that Frame Games is actually a very big player and doing very heavy stuff, maybe like a direct advisor to Elon Musk, possibly one of the main players behind Ban the ADL, that possibly Frame Games infiltrated the alt-right, and then he kept those contacts, and then when Ban the ADL happened, that was really a psyop, so to say, that Frame Games used the alt-right and those connections that he built up then on behalf of Elon Musk to kind of take down the ADL. And there's also the aspect that Frame Games was very against the ADL from the very beginning. Like he said he was going to take down the ADL. And I'm not sure if you had thoughts on that. Is it possible that, or if Kristen Ruby wanted to express herself for research, but that is it possible Frame Games was behind Ban the ADL, or is some sort of
Well,
direct
she can
advisor
definitely
to Elon
come
Musk?
up. I mean, the ADL thing. Yeah, I mean, I think that's certainly possible. He's connected with him. He's hanging out with Vivek, etc. I mean, I think the ADL thing is, has the ADL really been taken down? I mean, there's no doubt that there was a huge wave of trolling going on about the ADL, but the ADL seems to now be in good terms. I mean, they've reconciled with Elon Musk.
Well, Elon had to
Um,
go to Israel, right? And he
yeah.
had that OpenAI summit with Elon and Netanyahu talking about how AI was going to be critically important, and AI is being used to do a lot of the bombing in Gaza and to target and assassinate various people.
Hmm.
So Elon and the ADL. I mean, the ADL has had a long history acting as a military intelligence wing of the Israeli Defense Forces. So I saw that as kind of much more a kind of power struggle over control of the ADL. And it looks like Greenblatt has gotten the message and is broadly sympathetic to Elon. And by the way,
Yes.
there's this larger question about the ADL and it's having a blacklist and then banking services. Many of the banks that are shedding employees right now are paying huge settlements use software developed by ADL adjacent programmers and ADL programmers to basically blacklist various critics of Israel and who they wouldn't allow to have banking
Well, I
services.
mean, related to the alt-right and in the Anon, that say if Mike Ben's frame games, he built up these connections and he kept them useful. And even though the movement didn't go anywhere, maybe the alt-right or some sort of multicultural conservatism won out, but he kept those contacts and he used them largely to do the ban the ADL movement. And, those people all of a sudden reappeared and, create this massive pushback against the ADL. And a lot of the people that Frank Bain said he was going to take down the whole time. And then after the ban, the ADL kind of causes the ADL to make these concessions. Then, all of a sudden, like Lucas Gage is banned again. And, so he just brought these alt-right people back for, a short-term use.
Yeah. Jack Brand, you've been here for a little bit. Would you like to take the floor?
Sure. So to go back to what we were talking about at the very beginning, what do you think it would look like to make something where you have to have identification or like something to get rid of bots? What would that look like?
I think it would look like something that people wouldn't quite like, to be honest. And that would be that you go in, you show your driver's license, you have the ability to have one account and maybe another one for, a business or something like that, and that you are truly verified. So the verified check mark used to be about celebrities. I think it even like emerged with, what is it, like Demi Moore and Ashton Kutcher? It's just some frivolous thing like that.
Let's go.
And it started to spread, and tons of journalists had a blue check mark, et cetera. I had a blue check mark for a long time. Then it got taken away for a little while, and then now we're in this kind of no man's land of you are paying for quote premium services, and I guess could get ad payments and all this kind of stuff. And you have a blue check mark. It should be about authenticity. And I know a lot of people don't like that idea of you have to, I mean, you could presumably use a pseudonym, but you have to just demonstrate that you are a human and that there is one account associated with your
I'm
driver's
okay with
license
that
number.
if it's Yeah, I'm okay with that if the back end is the American government verifying it. But
Right.
Elon's closeness with the Israelis, and meeting with Netanyahu, all of that has me like very worried. And
Yes.
if they implemented that on this platform, and I couldn't be sure that it was a U.S. government or like August country running the verification, I would be gone like Enron from this platform. Like if I'm basically like providing more information from myself to the Israelis. I mean, driver's licenses have where your address is. They have a lot of personally identifying information on it.
Sure.
So I don't know that I'd be keen on that necessarily, but I take your idea on the sentiment of it. I do wonder why we can't have a toggle in these spaces where we actually like know who everybody is.
Mm-hmm.
And
But I mean, that's where I lean. Actually, I lean towards authentication.
what
I
about
think if all you needed was an ID and you could still just be anonymous, I think people would just get over it.
Yeah.
what about a not-for-profit like Nominet? You know how the DNS system or archive.org or something that's U.S. based, but is not corporate or government, somewhere in between, neutral.
Yeah, I think in reality, all those things get taken over by large billionaires who are often connected to Zionists anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at all the problems that like Wikipedia's had of like the Zionists manipulating truth in the service of the Israeli agenda.
Definitely. I think it would only be fair if you have to submit nudes to an Israeli company.
Yeah, no, I mean
Um,
obviously,
right.
But
Yeah.
Richard,
And
I mean,
Dissident.
one person's nudes is another person's advertising. So frankly, I think
right.
it would be nice of them to just post my nudes. I mean, it's a little gauche if I do it myself. You know.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
You know.
You want the docs to
I want the docs. I want everyone to be shocked at how big it is. That's what I
Wow.
want.
What are your
Well,
thoughts on that?
that would have many geopolitical consequences that
Absolutely, just
I'm
like Hunter.
afraid to even contemplate.
Hunter
Yeah.
Johnson sounds like a great a great
Hunter Johnson.
ticket.
Well,
Hunter
Charles,
Johnson.
I will tell you that the firm that Elon uses on this platform, where they added the feature where you can upload your government ID, the firm, I'll put it in the nest, Censored Man did a tweet on this. Everyone should pay attention to this. The company is called AU10 Ticks. It is an Israeli company. The CEO is Ron Atzom, was a member of the Shin Bet's Unit 8200, so on and so forth. But yeah, it is an Israeli firm that is collecting. If you upload your identification to this platform, you're not forced to do it right now. You can just pay for the blue check mark. But I don't know why people would upload their ID, but they have that feature. If you do it, it's an Israeli firm that's collecting all of that info.
Fascinating stuff. I mean, this gets back to the Musk issue where, there's the ban the ADL, there's the, replying to Keith Woods a few times. There's that replying to someone I've never heard of before, who is basically making a Kevin McDonald like argument. Just, the Jews really like diversity, but then when diversity starts criticizing Israel, they hate it. And Elon saying that's absolutely correct. I mean, you can take it that way, and all these liberals freaked out and so on. But what I would look at is the fact that in that interview where Elon's actually even talking about the end of Twitter, he's wearing a bomber jacket, he's wearing an Israeli dog tag, and a Pentagon spokesman actually wore one as well. It seems to me like almost this like conspicuous marking of territory. We've got you. He's one of us. That's what that looks like to me. And
100%.
I don't know. This Elon is based notion is something that I bought in the very beginning when he was talking about buying the platform and so on. And the more you look into Elon, the more you see his behavior, the more you look at his companies, just the more and more skeptical I get of him. And I just
Have you read
don't buy it.
Have you read the biography? I've been listening to the audiobook, and
Interesting.
they talk about that he speaks like he has the mandate of heaven, and there's something he certainly has this guru vibe. He has the capacity, I think, to like seize movements, energy. You know what I mean? He does have like that great man ability, and I know I mentioned to
Yeah.
you, it's very anti-Christ like, where he's sort of posing as he's going to solve all the problems, right? Like he seems like he's the only one who gets the truth,
Oh
and yet
yeah.
everything kind of twisted. Like oh, he's free speech, but frankly, he's the one making everybody give their government IDs. Government IDs, like he's really locked in the surveillance of it. He's like, you know what I mean? He's like, I won't ban you. I'm just going to monitor the heck out of you, and the Israelis are going to do it.
Yeah.
It's a lot like Trump. Trump
Yeah.
poses as the ultra American, but it's really Israeli control. It's the tail wagging the dog of this
Yeah,
relationship.
he openly said on the stream with
You,
the Jewish elders that 2/3 of his friends are Jewish. I mean, you imagine that the richest man in the world openly said that his inner circle, 2/3 of his friends are Jewish.
yeah. There is that, grandiose narcissism as well about him. Like, I've done more to fight climate change and to improve the environment than any other human alive. I know more about manufacturing than any other human alive. It just is on and on. I mean, I'm highly skeptical of EVs in general and their impact on the environment. And I don't know. I mean, it grates on you. And then also this aspect of that interview, which wasn't scrutinized to the degree that it should have been, where he's talking with this reporter from CNBC, and he's basically saying like, yeah, we're going to lose advertising, and then Twitter is going to be gone, and we're going to release the Twitter files, and Earth will know that Disney destroyed Twitter, and Earth will just be outraged. I don't know how they'll express their outrage because there is no Twitter. So on some other platform, they'll be talking about the end of Twitter and how Elon's not responsible for the end of Twitter. But I mean, very passive aggressive and almost kind of quasi nihilistic like attitude he had. It's a very strange way.
Not
It's
necessarily, Richard. I took it slightly differently,
okay.
which is that the sort of there's a lot of Jewish folks in the advertising industry, and they were increasingly fleeing from this platform, in large measure because they were saying that it was too anti-Semitic or wasn't censoring enough, which I took as he hadn't hired enough Israeli spies within the company. So then he pivoted and hired a bunch of Israeli spies, but he hired all the Likud and IDF ones and not the Mossad and New York ones. So he's sort of in this like interesting moment. And I think the larger issue is that as interest rates go up, firms spend less money on advertising generally because people consume less. And so there's less money available in the advertising market to begin with. And that's before you get into all the efforts to clean up what is effectively a very unregulated space, which is ad tech generally.
Yeah.
And so I think that there's a lot going on there. I also think it's a way in which a lot of Jewish power, I mean, I don't know if we're allowed to say that, but it's a way in which it can control Elon by basically having Twitter and basically, controlling him by turning on and off the ad spigot to keep this platform going. If you could basically say, okay, Elon, we'll let you have ads on this platform. We'll say you're a good boy. Then Elon is much more secure and he's much happier. But if you have that sort of weapon over him where you can take away the ads at any moment and you can basically, a lot of his personal net worth is tied up in this app. He has a lot of problems there. And it's a way of flexing on him if you want him to do something at, say, Tesla or SpaceX.
Interesting.
And just to mention, it was Andrew Ross Sorkin at the New York Times, not the CNBC interview.
Oh, is it okay?
No, Andrew Ross Sorkin has joint appointments there at both CNBC and New York Times.
I've seen him on CNBC.
This is interesting. I want to add something. It was actually I want to correct myself. It was Kristen Ruby who first put out this story on this Israeli tech firm that Musk is using for Twitter to verify your ID. Not only do you upload your government ID, it has you take a selfie. So it's basically gathering your biometrics, your everything about you. It's just bizarre, but
yeah, they use a lot of this stuff on the dating sites. So if you're disliked by the Israelis, they will bar you from certain dating apps.
Well, that's what happened.
Well, I mean, if you read the Musk biography, he wants to
this
X
kind of seriously
into a one-stop shop that has everything, including banking.
Yes. It's very funny. It's kind of anecdotal. So I remember looking into the Right Stuff app, and I was not, and I say this honestly and genuinely, I was not actually interested in dating via the Right Stuff app, but I was kind of interested in the whole idea of it, and I did a little monologue talk on it with my group and so on. That it was somewhat critical, even a little bit sarcastic about the app, but nothing too bad. And but in order to do that, I signed up and kind of created a profile and whatever. I did not date anyone via that app, and what I hear, it's kind of a ghost town and whatever. But I only date liberal chicks. But I went back. Someone mentioned it on a space. I think it might have been Zag or something, and I was like, I wonder.
You're cutting out, Richard. You're cutting out. Yeah.
Go ahead. He's cutting out.
Peter Thiel.
It's still around, according to some of the people that joined the space. They're still on it.
But it's been banned. I just it seemed almost like
But the
unnecessary
right
or
stuff
something, like kind of
app is funded
insulting.
by, of course. Well, I guess you didn't have it, Richard. You didn't have that right stuff.
I
You know,
didn't.
it's a
Not the
shame.
right stuff.
It's a
Yeah.
shame you can't join that gay conservative dating app.
You're
Oh wait,
formally
Oh,
banned.
yeah. I am formally banned. Yes, correct. And I don't know why. I never messaged anyone. I doubt I even uploaded a profile picture because I know this sounds like the guy who says I read Playboy for the articles, but I actually just downloaded it for research purposes because I was just doing a little
no,
talk,
I have.
with my group.
Me
I have.
too. Me too.
I have an
Yeah.
Israeli spy friend who told me that like there's this database that basically if you're a white nationalist or whatever and you try to join a dating site, they will only match you with black chicks because they think it's funny. So like
It's interesting.
could I see them doing that? Yeah, I could see them doing that. Of course.
Israeli interesting, Charles, because I noticed that being a trend for
I
myself.
have noticed that too. I get a lot of young black women swiping on me.
Well, why
Or
is
Latina
it that
women.
A fate
whenever I
worse
go
than
to
death.
any web page on the entire internet, they're always advertising gay cruises, and I'm like, why? I mean,
Right.
granted,
Oh
I did a
no,
lot
Richard.
of
Don't admit
They're
research
that.
trying to
in.
recruit you, Richard.
Who is
Well,
Benji?
now,
Benji was
granted, I did a heavy research into gay cruises, but it was it was an academic interest of mine. I mean, I've never published on it, of course, but
Right.
why me? Why does this happen? This is an outrage.
Yeah. The
We should
Gmail
look
bugs
into
it up.
this.
Yeah. Be careful.
Israeli interesting, if I don't say so.
I love how that's cut on. Israeli. It's one of my great points.
Israeli ridiculous.
Which, by the way,
Should go trademark.
was initially a misspelling because I fucked it up like the first time I did it.
Uh-huh.
But whatever, I'll take it.
I want to go on the left stuff. That's the dating app that I want. The left, yeah.
Just
It's
so
like
long as
art.
I'm at a
It's
stage
called
now in my
the
life where just so long as the women on the dating sites are actually women, I'm happy. That's where I am.
I've
That's what
noticed
I am.
fewer trans on these dating apps now. I got to be honest.
I will say one
Oh yeah,
thing.
when I go on
Go on the
dating apps,
right
like a
stuff,
quarter of
you'll
them
end
are
up on a
trans.
date with Blair White in no time.
I would
But,
like
yeah.
to
Well, if you're
disclose
lucky.
one thing that you might find
If you're lucky.
interesting,
If you're
Richard.
lucky.
Clarissa Goldenberg has swiped right on me on a dating app.
Oh,
Yeah,
interesting.
so I have a
That's her
lot of
problem,
friends
man.
that like serve abroad for the U.S. and for the British or whatever, and they tell me like there's all these weird Israelis that like figure out who they are through the dating sites and then match with them, and they get like really freaked out and creeped out, so they never actually like meet any of the local women. But there's like a lot of that going on, I think, around the world. And if you could kind of
You dodged a
control
bullet,
who
name. You dodged a bullet there, mate.
It's a good thing I'm not into bleach blondes, or my life could have taken a turn for the worst. You know,
She
Or
she might have
animal sacrifice.
sacrificed you. I mean,
Yeah.
it's possible.
she
Yeah, name's not
slipped
in the
some
invite.
Rohypnol in your drink, and the next thing you
You
know,
gotta watch out for us
you're on a
blondes.
table and she's holding a knife above your head.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
you get
happened to everyone, I guess.
you get another circumcision that way.
Oh, is the guy going to bite it off in this case?
You would definitely end up in a tunnel of some kind.
Can we, Richard? What do you think of the Jew tunnels? Like, we haven't talked about that as yet, have we?
Look, I mean, the only thing I mean, look, obviously, it was kind of hilarious, just those images. I mean, particularly the like the acidic Jew like emerging from underground and then running off. I mean, it's truly hilarious. I think legitimate questions should be asked about this. One thing that I did notice is that there's a broken kettle logic to all of their explanations. And so the broken kettle, of course, is you go to your neighbor and you return his broken kettle, and he questions you about that, and you're like, well, it's first off, it's not broken, and secondly, it was broken before you lent it to me, and thirdly, I never borrowed your kettle. I mean, so it's this overdetermined, kind of thing. And so it was like, oh, it's nothing. Why are you even talking about it? And then it's like, oh, well, it was about COVID. We just wanted to worship on our own for COVID. Or also, it's about teenagers who are messianic, and they're from Israel, and they were trying to like steal 770, or which sounds a little more plausible, I guess. And then they'll have these even other explanations, and we were just trying to expand, and so it's like there are too many explanations, and the pieces don't fit, and it sounds like they're giving different explanations to different audiences. And so like Gavin McGinnis, I mean, on the debate the other night, he would just shut down the debate whenever someone mentioned this subject, and he'd be like, that's low IQ, that's low IQ. And it's like, is it low IQ? I mean, I'm curious. It sounds like you're low IQ, shutting down discussion. And he was like, if the Hell's Angels did this, you wouldn't say anything. Like, what does that mean? But I don't. It seems to me like they're offering different explanations to different audiences. And so, like, the conservatards get the explanation that's about COVID, and they're like, oh, based, fighting COVID restrictions like DeSantis did, And then for more intelligent people, they're saying, oh, well, there's a split in the organization or whatever. And that actually struck me as more plausible. Maybe that was designed for my type of reader. And then they're doing other explanations for others. So I don't know what in the hell is going on. I mean, I don't want to jump to a conclusion that it's sex trafficking, but I mean, I have questions.
Well, it parallels the rise of the alt-right, because you have currently the most powerful Jewish organization in the world, with 6,000 rabbis all over the world that started there. The rabbi passed away in 1994, but in reality, it's not really headquartered there anymore. So it's just where it all started. So you have a lot of people fighting for control of the center, and it's really rundown neighborhood, almost all African Americans, and a lot of Israelis. A lot of people sleep in the synagogue there, and the international movement is no longer headquartered there. So kind of be like the alt-right or something like that, where it's like, oh, it all started with Richard Spencer.
No.
At this point,
No.
Come
on.
You sound like you're running cover here.
No, David.
Well, the 770 is not that important for the international movement. You have 6,000 rabbis all over the world. They might sound like
no. Come on. No.
Why
kind of like an underground.
By the way, I've been a guest.
Charlottesville, but
we
should have done.
I've been to that synagogue 50 times. Like I said,
I could have did the
they
tiki
trained
torch.
these rabbis all over the world now. The rabbi passed away in 1994.
No. It is the head of it is the headquarters of Chabad. And I know that because the rabbi who ran the place, who invited me there for Shabbos to chat, told me it was the head of Chabad around the world, and it's where the Rebbe Schneerson's gravesite is.
Yeah, but there's faction. I'm saying there's the grave, there's the site, but no, there's 6,000 rabbis all over the world. They might make pilgrimage there, but the site where it all started.
Hey, David,
where it all started is super important.
We're not having any of this Hasbara here. No.
Yeah,
here's the reality of the situation.
This is a Gentile space.
Here's the reality of the situation. And by the way, I like Chabad. They're fucking weird. I'm down for how weird they are, and all the sex trafficking and all of that. Goddamn, it's impressive what they get up into. But a lot of this has to do with how they shut down a lot of the exemptions around diamond trading, which was something that the Treasury did in the first week of this year. And this was, of course, a big issue for the Israeli world as well as for the Chabad world. And so there's a lot of pressure that's been brought to bear on Chabad, in particular its relationship with Jared Kushner, and in particular its relationship with the Alevi Foundation, which was used to money launder a lot of bribes that were paid to the Trump world around getting people pardons in the waning days of the Trump administration, when President Kushner offered a lot of those pardons. So no, we're not going to do the 770 stuff. Isn't the headquarters, because it is the headquarters. And there's a reason that Jared Kushner and Ivanka prayed at the site at that very location, which was on election day 2016, and of course there's a reason why Milei visited the place. So we're not going to have any of that in this space, I'm afraid.
They're all Noahides.
Yeah.
They're all Noahides. Because isn't it right that the Chabad is all about promoting Noahidism across the world, which is like basically like a religion that elevates Jews? Adam Green talks about this stuff a lot.
I think Adam goes too hard on the ideological religious stuff. I think that's a bit much, personally. I mean, look, they're an international money laundering operation that has a kind of religious affiliation to it. And there's a long history of Chabad acting as a kind of quasi-intelligence service. And there's a long history of Vladimir Putin in particular using Chabad, which is effectively state-sanctioned Judaism, in Russia to police the various Russian Jewish oligarchs around the world, especially in Israel and the United States. So there's a lot of weird stuff there. And, their view, it's sort of a one-drop rule, their view when it comes to Jews. And, there's a lot of connections with, of course, Jeffrey Epstein, the late, great Jeffrey Epstein, and the Chabad world, much of which is kind of centered in Belarus. And I know, Mr. T up there knows a bit about this, and maybe we can chat about that tomorrow in our luncheon. But
yeah. Also,
yeah.
their Chabad is directly connected to multiple presidential candidates. I mean, RFK Jr. speaks with this Chabad guy all the time.
Rabbi Shmuley.
Yes, my Rabbi Shmuley, and he's RFK is like well to the right of Trump or Joe Biden on the Israel question.
Yes, and of course he also meets with Cory Booker as well, who's not at all a homosexual. How dare you suggest that?
But by the way,
If you would bring up his homosexuality, Richard, that's so uncouth of you.
I didn't even mention it.
The Vivek Mike Benz connection. I mean, I'm curious, Richard, what you think about sort of this new or emerging like Indian Israeli axis opposed to Muslims.
Richard,
yeah.
a quick note. It's been brought to my attention that actually Kristen Ruby discovered Elon Musk's third-party verification company being Israeli, not Censored Man. Apparently, he stole the tweet.
Oh, okay. Censored Man is anonymous, and he does a lot of tweeting on this issue. But that's interesting. He should give credit where credit is due. I'm glad that's brought to our attention.
In the future, we'll all be plagiarists, but not
yeah,
all of us.
What was the
Harvard?
I was saying Indians and Israelis uniting.
What was the question again?
Ricardo was bringing up the BJP and Likud alliance.
Oh yeah.
And all of that. And I
think, I mean, look, Vivek is going to probably do well in Iowa. I'll make the prediction. I don't think he's going to win Iowa. I think Trump will. But my prediction that he might even come in second. He might, but I think the story out of Iowa will be that Vivek did well. I mean, he's gone to every county twice or something. He's done a lot of investment there. Iowans are goofy, and so the kind of con artist.
Steve King endorsed him. Steve King endorsed him.
Yes, exactly.
And so did Candace Owens.
Candace Owens is on the trail. So I think he's going to do well. I mean, who knows? He might not, and that's also significant. But there is this kind of there is this alliance. I mean, if we assume that Benz is an Israeli asset and Benz is connected with other Israeli assets like the National Conservatism and Harzoni, etc. Yeah, I mean, I think, and they're also kind of lightly connected to Russia, which works, very well hand in glove with the Bibi types. A lot of people are quite aware of that. Then yeah, I can see a sort of alliance. It's this interesting kind of white-ish alliance, right-wing alliance. Vivek, Mike Benz, etc. They're kind of foreign. They're connected to these other countries, and they're being kind of outlandishly right-wing, and they get a lot of authenticity with kind of goofy white Americans. I can definitely see this as something. I mean, I think it's happening right before our eyes.
Doesn't it seem as if Vivek is a trial run for somebody else to run in the future? Almost like it's like an intelligence gathering operation?
I think Vivek's positioning himself as the heir to Trump by never directly challenging him.
Yes.
Well, I mean, he's playing for 2028. I mean, Vivek.
I think it's a platform to get his name out there, and he is popular now, and he's probably gonna do like a local, governorship run, is my guess.
No, this is a Indian con man who saw a white man doing a hustle and thought he could do it better, and that's basically my interpretation of it.
Don't you think also Vivek is kind of like a pure, unadulterated, like Peter Thielian candidate?
Oh yes, well he's known him for quite a long time.
Mm-hmm.
So there's the Thiel connections there. Thiel is basically no longer in politics because the U.S. and British intelligence sort of came after Thiel in a lot of ways and took his money off the sideline. But the Thiel octopus, is still running around. Each of the tentacles has a brain of its own, doing its own thing, even though the actual head was severed.
Yeah. Actual octopuses have brains in their tentacles. I'm not joking.
Right.
I think
that's
that's
right.
correct.
Yeah. That's why they're delicious.
Nothing tastes better than brain.
Yeah.
Let's go to some. I can't let anyone up. Do we need to kick someone off? Ace.
What's
Sorry.
No.
You can
No,
come
we
back.
have
Zach,
no,
wait a sec.
Duvid.
You can have two
have
I
co-hosts.
just have one
Oh,
question,
yeah.
and I'm
Two
gonna bounce
co-hosts.
out of here.
Yeah, Duvid's now just listening. Okay, I'll let some other people up here.
Well,
Yeah, Richard, I don't
I'll
recognize
start
any of these folks.
talking because I
Thank
haven't
God.
spoken yet.
Sure, go ahead.
Hey guys, what's going on?
Pax did. Yes, go
good
ahead.
to see you again, Richard.
Good to talk
Hi,
to you.
Pax.
Hey, Meg. So, like, I just wanted to talk a little bit about like the title of the space because anonymity. I know I'm like semi-anonymous, but I do think that in terms of politics, kind of in terms of real political change getting done, the internet is not really the place. I think the future of politics, especially with AI changing everything, is going to be real life. I think the internet mainly, what it is now, what it's been, and what it's going to be is basically for education and entertainment, not so much for like actually getting policies passed. And I think this is what Trump people don't understand. They think like posting memes means that you're like winning, when in reality, you're posting a meme and laughing at the libs while they're like passing laws to crush you. So that's something that they need to understand. And I think
don't
that
want
when
them
you
to
look at the
understand.
successful political achievements of the so-called right, like the pro-life movement and the gun movement, those are groups with actual real-life presence. They're not online organizations, although they definitely have propaganda. They understand that to actually get laws passed, you have to go out in the real world. And I think that also connects to why the alt-right was so brutally crushed, is because the alt-right was actually going out and, causing a ruckus. And the system really did not appreciate that. And I think they want a lot of people to stay online in terms of politics.
Yeah, no, I get that. I mean, when online goes offline, I think some interesting things can happen. I mean, because Charlottesville was in many ways a kind of gathering of a lot of people who were connected online, and it went offline and kind of off the rails as well. And I think J6 was an example of that times 1,000, of all of these people hyped up on Q, hyped up on Stop the Steal stuff, and they went offline and immediately went way off the rails.
Oh, that was why I requested to speak. See, I started coming online around 2020, and I saw a lot of accounts, and they were like psyop accounts where they would like cue people. It's like, where are they now? Like they were so big back then, and they would be tweeting things like 1776, Civil War is here, and riling people up. And now they're all gone. Where'd they all go?
They're on Truth Social now.
They're underground.
Yeah, it's the Q people definitely disappeared around when Trump lost. Funny coincidence.
But it was like a big psyop.
Yeah,
basically.
No, they're still around. They're on Truth Social for the most
yeah.
part.
Okay, what
What a
is the
downgrade.
next thing? Okay, because let's go back to Q. So the alt-right emerges in 2015. 2016, it is feeling itself. 2017, it is increasingly going offline and going off the rails as well. And I would say by 2018, there was a general, it was engaged in infighting and
Shit.
You're
it
breaking
was
up,
at the
Richard.
It's the Shabbat. It's over.
2018, it was infighting, but it was also when the censor hammer came down big time.
LTE. So I'll just go on LTE as I, it's very this polar vortex has hit my my community, and so I don't know if there's something going on with that, or just too many
You're
people
good
are on the
now.
internet. Yeah, too many people might be on the internet as well, because everyone's stuck in their house due to.
I hope everyone's staying warm. It's very cold.
Yes, it is very cold out there. My car just does not work. It got too cold. So hopefully, I don't know what I'm going to do.
Hopefully it
Um,
thaws.
yeah, that's what I'm hoping. It'll thaw. The battery will start working again.
Post through it. Post through it, Richard. Post through it.
Yeah. So in the fall of 2018, I started first hearing about QAnon. And I don't know when the first Q post was. It might have been in 2017, maybe early 18. And then in 2019, QAnon was getting proselytized for by Alex Jones and InfoWars and Roseanne Barr and et cetera. It was reaching the boomers. It was going off 4chan and into the boomers' brains. And 2020, the compounded by COVID and lockdowns, it was going gangbusters. So remember, we're already in 2024. Like, what is, if we assume this, which I think we should, which is that for Trump to win, there needs to be something extra. I think that the alt-right as a big tent was indispensable, in fact, towards Trump's election. I don't think he would have won, indeed, without the alt-right as a kind of unpaid PR firm that was going crazy, making Trump special, making him more than just a candidate. It was revolutionary, and all of these hilarious videos, many of which did reach, boomer voters and so on, and weren't just reaching, some kid who wouldn't vote. I think the alt-right was actually integral in Donald Trump's election in 2016. I don't think he would have been elected without him. It was that little extra something that pushed him across the goal line. I think I would say the same thing for 2020. Now, Trump didn't win, of course. He did remarkably well. The maybe you could say liberal shenanigans with mail-in voting and all that kind of stuff helped Biden get across the finish line, and Trump would have won. That's a fair point. But he did remarkably well. And that was cooking for a year and a half at least, if not 2 years, before Trump got in office. So what is cooking now? Like, what is QAnon just going to reemerge, or what is the, or is something like Pizzagate? Is the Epstein files going to be like Pizzagate? Like, what is cooking that is going to push Trump across the finish line, or potentially at least in 2024?
Terrorism.
We'll probably know by this summer. We'll see.
Her name is
Something
Laura
cooking.
Loomer.
Well, Richard, if we go back to the words of Kantbot, German idealism still has to be fulfilled through Donald Trump. So we're anxiously waiting for that process.
See, I think, like, if you go back to 2015, 2016, when there were all those trucks of peace driving through cities, and then suddenly Trump gets elected, it all just went away. It's like every terrorist, ISIS just disappeared off the face of the earth.
Yeah.
I find that, like, really strange. Like, what exactly was that? And so I think that could be reactivated, something along those lines, particularly with the relevancy of Israel and the desire of the Zionists to get Western populations like behind, like, you know, their program to retake Gaza. Let's put it that way.
That's an interesting suggestion. Very, extremely sinister.
Well, I do think
I
think
say
ISIS was just
Christina
crushed.
Pushaw is going to leave the DeSantis campaign, and she's going to inject so much Botox that she'll become Botox woman, a super powered political force that can't be stopped.
Correct.
That's also possible. But
What if
I guess
Trump?
that was
What
a
if
joke.
Trump or Biden
But
die?
seriously, what?
What if Trump or
Go,
Biden?
Chuck.
Yeah. What if Trump or Biden dies this year?
That is
That's.
possible.
I mean, there's probably a 10% chance that is going to happen with like natural causes. I
Yeah.
mean,
Like
But,
so.
but
once
what
you
if?
hit 75, I mean,
Yeah. So I
it's
just went to a 79-year-old's funeral, and my uncle died at 82, and I think Trump will be 79 and Biden will be 82 by election day. And like, I don't know, they both died of naturalish causes. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like you live for forever. So like, what happens if Trump wins the nomination and then dies? Like, what is that? What? You know what I mean? I don't know. I've been thinking about that a lot lately though, because it's like, and what if it like looks like an accident but isn't an accident, but could be an accident? You know what I mean? Because like, there's a lot of old people that die under suspicious circumstances when people want to inherit shit.
Yeah, very true. Because you have to have really good stock to live into your 90s. So I'm not sure, especially with the stress of a presidency for Trump and now for Biden. It's very possible. Yeah, yeah.
But like, what happens? Like, I mean, I don't mean like in like a like metaphorical sense. I mean, like, what actually happens?
An
Well,
emergency
I don't
convention,
think we've
perhaps.
ever had I mean, I don't think we've ever had two presidential candidates that are basically 80 plus. So this year, you know, the running mates will be a huge deal, and I'm not sure if Kamala will be chosen again. I don't know what you think
Well,
about
let's
that,
just say
Charles.
I don't know. I don't know about Kamala or not. I just know that like physically, like, do the parties renominate them? Does the vice president
It would
become
have
the
to,
top
right?
of the
There'd be an
ticket?
emergency meeting of the electors, wouldn't there?
Yeah, I don't know.
Oh, if they die before the election, you mean?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like,
Yes,
like,
yes.
like it's summertime. Donald Trump wins the nomination. Whatever, has a massive heart attack. You know, going to go talk to Melania or have a Diet Coke or
Okay,
whatever.
so the GOP will reconvene, and it'll be like a brokered election, you know, election for delegates, and it'll go on that, and they'll go through however many rounds until someone gets the majority, and that'll be the person.
Don't you think it's a possibility too that Trump will be assassinated?
Of course, it's
It's
possible.
I
possible.
They don't
highly
want him
doubt
in
it.
there, so
I
yeah.
highly doubt it.
If they can keep him from office,
Why
that'll
do
be
you
enough.
doubt that they'll assassinate him?
Because once you start having political assassinations, that's when things really start flying off the handle, and the system does not want that
Well,
to
we
happen.
just had Abe. We had Abe got killed, right? Like, what was it, 2 years ago now? We had that dude in South Korea who just got
Yeah, but
stabbed in the
Abe,
neck.
he was
Yeah, that was
inactive. He was
wild.
retired. He wasn't like a
No, dude,
vying leader of the
Yeah,
no,
country.
no,
he
no,
still had a
no, dude,
huge
no, dude.
movement. That was a big
He
deal.
was a party boss within the Liberal Democrats in Japan, or the LDP party in Japan.
Well, also he was assassinated by like a fanatic. It wasn't someone who was
No, no,
connected
Well, that's
to
what they
like the
tell
no,
you,
no,
rival
but
party, right?
no. He was assassinated. Abe was assassinated by somebody who was pissed off about all the religious cults in Japan. They were giving all this political support to Abe, including the Moonies, who had basically suckered in his own mother, and he's become a kind of cultural figure in Japan. I don't know the story about the South Korean one, but like, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. I mean, we've had other political assassinations in our nation's
Well,
history.
I also think Japan is a much more stable country than America. Like, if you look at polls, like 70% of Republicans in Texas or something like that want to secede from the United States. And I feel like the system is not gonna like tempt fate by assassinating Trump. That would just be too risky.
I think if it did happen, Charles, it wouldn't even be called an assassination. It would look more like natural causes, but you'd have the QAnon. People wouldn't accept
I
that it wasn't on
I
purpose.
think I mean, I don't know if you guys want me to just go into my last election call, but I mean, I've been suggesting this over and over again that things might really be coming to a head in 2024.
Hmm.
Do you think he will be assassinated, Richard? I mean, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I think that in 2024, neither side is going to accept the outcome. And I think that is a very dangerous place to be. So if Trump wins, and again, he's up on polling. I mean, this is not outside the realm of possibilities, even with an indictment, even from a jail cell, et cetera, et cetera. The left will go nuts. I mean, we saw this after he won in 2016. There were major protests in New York, Washington, et cetera, and I could see that ramped up. If Biden wins, I do think that the stop the steal stuff will just be ramped up on steroids, and I don't know what they're going to do. They can't do a J6 again. I don't know. I just think we're crossing over this horizon where we don't know what's going to happen. And I do think the possibility of instability is high, higher than ever in my lifetime, certainly. And so it's just something to consider. I don't know. I have this sense that just things can't go back to normal. Like we're never going to go back to Mitt Romney versus Hillary Clinton or something. I know they never ran against each other. You know what I mean? Just these center right, center left dynastic parties that push a little here and there, but not too far, and are unified on key issues. I just think we are past that. And it's not like again, the polarization ultimately isn't about issues itself. It's about culture or lifestyle, you could even say. Maybe you could even say it's almost genetic. It's like there's a type of person who is a conservative. There's a type of person who is a liberal. And they are increasingly anxious and they are at war with one another. And they feel that the other one wants to genocide them. So it's like the conservatives all claim like the liberals hate us and want us dead. And then the liberals say the conservatives, they're actual Nazis. Like, both sides accuse the other side of genocidal extremism. And so, yeah, I mean, this is just my sense of foreboding. I don't, it's a weird prediction to make, and it's obviously like way out on a limb, but I do have a strong sense that 24 is it. Like we're going to pass over horizon after that.
I don't know. I think the system's more resilient. I think even if Trump won, they would have a plan. Like they're going to make him ineffective as a president, and his term will not accomplish much, just like it didn't accomplish much in 2016. I just think they got their bases covered. What could change things is like an extreme economic downturn combined with political assassinations. Then we would really start to see shit hit the fan. But I don't see that happening anytime soon.
I think Trump could get assassinated and nobody really care.
Oh, I think millions of
no
people
one
would
would
be
really
outraged.
care. I mean, come on,
No, I
Charles.
mean, I don't mean it like in the sense that like I don't think there'll be rioting. I think there'll be like grief and whatever. But I think there'll be a lot of people that'll be kind of like privately like, oh, thank God we got over that.
Well, Richard, isn't that your crucifixion thesis?
Yeah,
Well,
his crucifixion thesis, I think, is not wrong, but I think it's going to be more like a quiet smothering. So it's
the day of the pillow.
I think Republicans.
yeah, no, I think what's going to happen is Melania is going to realize that like this is the best it's ever going to get for her, and she's going to come
My
in.
pillow.
He's going to smother him with a my pillow. Thank you for stepping on my joke, May.
Your pillow.
Yeah, it's going to be my pillow, and that's going to be the end. And then what's going to happen is it's going to rescue Mike Lindell's business because he's going to sell commemorative my pillows to the liberals.
To liberals, yeah.
Yeah, to liberals.
Well, you'd be like, Melania,
He's going to choke on a
this
Big
looks like
Mac.
my pillow, is it not?
and
No,
gets
darling,
smothered by a My
it is
Pillow.
not my pillow.
I mean,
It
people
is
die all the
yours.
time, and people die all the time in their sleep, though. Like, if you don't believe that, just go like read a local obituary. Like, and there are people like in their 50s, 60s, 70s croaking all the time in their sleep. So, like, it's not out of the realm of possibility that like
Yeah,
Trump could
Biden's
like,
81.
yeah, Trump is like 77, 78 or some shit. I don't know.
I think the agents of chaos from 2020 will be activated full throttle should Trump somehow pull this off. You're going to see like roads blocked, protests, assaults on post offices, banks, municipal buildings. And there's going to be a whole army of marauders out there saying, this is the result. You guys gave us a fascist. We're freaking out now, and there's nothing you can do to calm us down, you know?
Yeah.
Like the purge almost is going to be like that, where law enforcement
Yeah, I
have
think
no
people are
choice but.
too. I think people are too fat and too like. I think January 6th happened, and a lot of people just don't want to throw away their lives for anything political. I think they're gonna bitch and moan, and like, there's gonna be a lot of like rage-filled people online who are probably foreign assets, but mostly like post January 6th, like people don't protest shit anymore. Like you look at how small a lot of these protests are of like Genocide Joe and everything, and
There's a large one tonight at the White House.
there was
I
a big
mean,
one tonight at the White
they
House,
were
but compared
pushing
to
the gates of
London,
the White House,
yeah,
Charles.
yeah, but compared to London, compared to Paris,
It's
compared to other
small,
like,
yeah,
yeah, it's
but it
small.
could grow. It could grow,
I mean, it's a great optics to like push the gates of the White House, whatever, fine.
especially if
But
there's no
like,
repercussions for these people like there were in 2020. If
I
they're
just
on the right
remember, like,
side
do
of
you
the
remember the
problem.
Iraq War protests in 2003, and like how fucking huge those were? There's just
Yes.
none of that in our culture anymore. Like, even the Black Lives Matter ones were like small compared to that.
Yeah, that was like 1 million people, wasn't it?
It was nuts, man. It felt like a whole. I was in the one in Boston, and it felt like the entire. Like, it felt like everybody was there. You know, like it was like a. I think I saw like my fifth grade teacher at it. You know what I mean? It was like one of those things.
Hoplite, you had your hand up.
Hey, how's it going? Yeah, I just have another question, then I'm gonna get out of here. I wanted to ask you, like, do you think that the email leaks that happened to the anonymous accounts in the alt right, like Katie McHugh, could happen again?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not going to happen to the alt right, I don't think. I could see something like that happening. I mean, Katie McHugh, from what I heard, even David Frum was involved with that to some degree, or pushing it
Yes,
along.
that's right. Yeah, David Frum gave her money and was supportive of her and giving the whole story to Rosie Gray, who was a BuzzFeed reporter who was tied into the whole Israel world. And
Right.
he was giving her money, I think, for diabetes medicine, if I recall correctly.
Yes.
And
Is Katie McHugh still alive?
I'm pretty.
my understanding is she's living under an assumed name, but she defamed me in this like France 24 interview thing. And honestly, she doesn't even have, like I looked into suing her and I had some people like look into where she might be and everything. And I think she had like a rice cooker to her name. And I was like, if I sue her, I'm just going to take her rice cooker. Like that seems kind of overkill. Like that seems kind of nuts.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's definitely
And I
what
think
she
the
is. But
Israelis like to use these types of people that are like desperate financially and otherwise to like make various false claims against people. So I think that's kind of what that is. David Frum bet me $1,000 in 2016, the week before the election, that Trump wouldn't win, and so he never paid me on that either. So he's kind of one of those types.
yeah. Um,
Thanks, guys. I
Lisa,
appreciate it.
yeah, sure. I
Let's
mean,
see.
I could see something like that. I would just say this to go back to a question I asked earlier. Like, I was aware of QAnon in 2018, and and certainly by 2019, I was well aware of it. It was a thing. What do they have something like this? I mean, wouldn't we already know of its existence? I mean, what
Right.
is going to be the next Q? Like, what are they going to use to do this? Or do they feel like they've already won over the entire online sphere already, so they don't need it. I don't know.
Well, you do have like the BAP
There,
people who are like, Trump fanatics. They pretend they're not, but they actually are. That's one thing that comes to mind.
right, but that's not quite big enough. I mean, that's smaller than the alt-right, and Q, the alt-right was bigger than that, and Q was much bigger than the alt-right.
Yes, that's true.
It could lead to an apathy, Richard. Just people will just throw their hands up and say it's this bad. There's nothing we can do. We have no power. The quote unquote they make the decision. So now we're just going to acquiesce. I'm going to live my life. I'm going to throw in the towel politically. Who cares? Screw it.
Yeah,
I think that's sort of the reaction that they want, because a lot of people in high-ranking politics or administrative positions don't, especially academia, don't like sort of the salt of the earth people to have an opinion on things, and I think that could go away quickly over the next few years should something like what Charles describes happens, because then they'll just get very discouraged and they'll say, all right, back to where we came from. We're going to sort of disengage again. That 12 million that came out from the rivers, the streams for Trump in 2020, those people will pack up and go home if something like this happens,
But do you think it'll be a push from Musk? Because if he gets behind him and all his libertarian populist people get behind him, perhaps that's what they're banking on. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that the Twitter acquisition was designed for that. It's a big weapon that they tried to use for DeSantis. I don't, as an aside, I don't know if there is an example of a worse political campaign than DeSantis's. Like, this has to go, and I'm not even trying to like piss on anyone's grave, but this has to go down as one of the biggest disasters ever in retail politics. I mean, they 100 million. They had a entire social network in which the CEO himself and his underlings were promoting a single candidate, and they're going to finish third at best. I mean, that is wow. I think you could have like elected a ham sandwich with that kind of infrastructure, and you can't elect Ron and Casey, who I guess are far more creepy and
Well, I guess the question is,
unattractive
what
than
was
a
the
ham sandwich. I mean, granted, a ham sandwich that sounds pretty good right now. I might vote for one.
I guess the question is, what was the $100 million used for? Right?
Well, surely to a large extent, it was used on consultants and advertisement and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, or maybe
Pedro Gonzalez. I mean, he
paying
cost
various
50
influencers.
at least went to Pedro.
Yeah, paying the various influencers who are on this platform, maybe, right?
Oh,
Like,
sir.
Yeah.
Like Will Chamberlain and people like that.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
exactly.
Oh, yeah.
Pedro doesn't come cheap. I mean, he mini ham sandwiches.
Well, if you saw a tweet montage about the tunnels from some of the major sort of center-right influencers, many anonymous as well, they're all like, oh, this is low brain. There's no evidence that this is widespread. This is ridiculous. Stop talking about the tunnels. Everyone has a tunnel. There's a whole montage.
Oh my God, you're so right.
They got the
Everyone-
talking points out.
A whole
Everyone has a
collage of these
tunnel.
tweets. I wanted to go after, but I realized a lot of these people are my mutuals, and I thought better of it, so I didn't.
You should have, pussy.
I know, but it's hopefully this too shall pass. But who knows?
Lisa.
I don't know. For me, $100 million being spent, that feels like they're laundering money to all their influencers and all their, like, all the people out there, and they're building
yes, but
databases
surely
of
they
everything.
wanted it to work.
I don't know who the they is here, right? Like, I know that there's a lot of money that was blown. Maybe DeSantis was like a patsy or something. Like, maybe he wasn't really supposed to win. They just wanted to see like how much money they could spend to build databases of what was going on. I don't know.
Yeah.
It does feel like there was a handoff from DeSantis to Vivek, like maybe like a month or two ago.
Yeah.
Doesn't that feel correct to you? I mean, I don't know what you think about that, but
yeah, I think it was further than a month ago. I kind of saw the Vivek mania occurring in the summer, even. and DeSantis was starting to flail. I mean, the DeSantis flailing coincided directly with Donald Trump's indictments, including the New York one over the Pussy Daniels, and then the ones over the summer with Jack Smith. That just sunk DeSantis's campaign, but he was flailing even before that. I mean, he was flailing from the very beginning. I mean, that launch was just such a joke.
What do you think about Chris Christie being a fake, an anti-Trump candidate? Like,
Oh,
so
he was actually pro-Trump. He went in to.
yeah, he went in to suck out the oxygen of the anti-Trump Republican side, and then drops out before New Hampshire. And of course, Bill Ackman is the money behind him, and Bill Ackman was a lot of the money behind Vivek. And now Bill Ackman is doing, who was supposedly this big liberal Democrat. He's now like pro-Republican and pro-Zionism and shaking down Harvard.
Interesting.
Yeah, but don't accuse him of being gay, Charles. Okay.
Oh, it's that guy, the guy who's like defending his wife,
his weird Israeli wife. Yeah.
He was funding Chris Christie.
Yeah, he was funding Chris Christie. He was funding Vivek, and he's like meeting with Dean Phillips, who's like the other guy. He's like anti-Biden. He's anybody but Biden, but he was like a super liberal Democrat donor for many years. And his dad was some like weird real estate slumlord dude. And he's been like shaking down Harvard and fighting with Harvard and MIT and all these things. And it just feels very like an Israeli op, right? Like he's got the Israeli wife. And there's all those rumors for a long time that he was gay, that Ackerman's gay. I don't know, like, people who are in finance will know what I'm talking about. He doesn't talk like any heterosexual man I know when it comes to talking about his wife and everything. I mean, and at a certain point, he keeps repeating the wife plagiarism stuff. You're like, is he trying to get divorced? Like, this is his second wife and everything. You know what I mean? It's just weird. So
interesting.
So I don't know. My current theory of the case is that Chris Christie was a fake candidate. He didn't spend any money on opposition research. He spent a bunch of money on TV ads that no one seems to have seen. There's just like a lot of weird shit there. And then you kind of look at like, all right, well, what does Christie do? Like Christie's a lobbyist when he's not like in government office. So I don't know. It's just very strange. The whole thing feels very off to me. So I think the people who, you were correct about this, Richard, and I owe you plaudits for this. Like the people who are like, oh, it's going to be like Trump, like the whole system's going to like make it be Trump. And I think that's right. Like the Republican Party is like rigging these various, vote counts across the system. Their RNC is basically totally controlled by Trump, by Trumpist allies. And yeah, it seems pretty obvious that it's going to be Trump that wins the nomination.
Yeah,
I do think.
I don't even think Nikki Haley wants to win, by the way, because Nikki Haley's saying all this like stupid shit, like the slavery comments, the I have plenty of black friends thing. I think she's one of these people that wants everybody to think she's running for president so that she can get like better book deals or get on like the board of Boeing again or whatever to get paid or whatever. So I think a lot of the whole campaign is kind of fake. And even Trump's campaign seems fake because he's like constantly going to trials and shit rather than actually campaigning.
I think there were a lot of Republican donors. I think the majority have supported Trump, but I think there were a lot who favored DeSantis for like electability reasons. Like I know Republicans who are actually like involved in politics, and that's the vibe I get from them. They're especially worried about Trump with white women. They think he's going to tank with white women, and that could potentially like cost a lot of seats and stuff like that. So I do think that's one aspect of DeSantis's campaign, but it's very hard to beat like a cult like figure like Trump.
I mean, that's why DeSantis was so pro-abortion. I mean, I don't know. I think there's a lot of elector bros who are trying to make money. I mean, that $100 million got a lot of people to sing a certain tune. Anyone who's ever met DeSantis knows he's a fucking weirdo. I liked him personally. Like, I was ready for a fellow autistic person to be president. Like, I was ready for that. I thought that would have been fun. But, clearly the wife was running him, and, we don't really need that in our lives.
Well, he's definitely not a natural-born politician. I think that's been made obvious. He's not. He doesn't seem like a very social person. He seems like a kind of recluse. That's the vibe I get.
Yeah, I think he's an actual psychopath, actually. Lisa, you wanted to jump in?
Hey, Richard. Hi, everybody.
Hey.
Just a hypothetical. So, what if Biden wasn't the nominee and say it was RFK and he won, he beat Trump? So what do you think? What do people think would be? Do you think that the MAGA crowd and the Republicans would accept that it's a fair election, or would they still, think Democrats cheated?
It's an interesting question. So, who were you suggesting would replace Biden?
I just picked RFK because I can't think of anyone else
Oh,
who.
RFK, but
Yeah.
he's not running in the
Yeah.
Democratic Party.
Oh, he's running as an independent?
Yes, he
Yeah, he
is.
switched.
It's an independent candidacy.
Okay, so just I can't even. There's like nobody really else. Like Dean Phillips.
No,
Just
Dean
say
Phillips.
someone
I mean,
else.
there's Gavin is the one who kind of has celebrity. He's a celebrity politician in a way.
Okay, so say it ended up being Gavin against Trump, and Gavin won. What do you think that there's a chance that if we go back to normal and everyone would be like, okay, there was a fair election, it
No,
wasn't rigged or anything? No, right, exactly. So I don't
no,
think
I
it's
don't think it will.
really
It's the
just about
polarization's too
Biden. I think
extreme.
it's
If
just
Trump's on the
yeah.
ticket
And
and he
Vivek
loses,
himself said this. He
it's
was
going to
like,
be a problem.
listen, we got to be honest here. Let's speak the truth. Biden is not running. He's not going to run in 2024. So we need to know who the Democrats are running. Like, it was kind of a weird comment, to be honest. But yeah, no, I think polarization is so extreme that there's just no way of turning the car around. I just think it's going in this direction inevitably. Trump versus someone. If Trump loses, we go crazy. This is where we are. Isaac, you've been lurking there. Isaac Cade, worldview philosopher. Okay, this is interesting. My core theme is embracing complexity. All right. Let's hear from you, Isaac. You have to unmute yourself. Well, this is already becoming very complex, Isaac.
It's the vow of silence.
Chastity, silence. What else?
Okay.
He does say in his bio he's
Okay.
not a
You're
real
going to have to
person,
be booted.
so.
All right. I'll let up. We're about to hit 3 hours. I might actually put a bookmark in it. I don't do these like 6-hour spaces that Zag and company.
That's ungodly. You're right. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Does anyone else have anything like kind of last minute? Do we want to tie a bow around the Mike Benz issue or?
I don't know, man. I think
talk about something else.
There's more shoes to drop on that. Who knows? But I have to run. But thanks for having me.
Okay.
My read on it basically is we're going to see a lot more weird Israeli and Russian and other foreign countries like running ops on this platform going into 2024. It's kind of just my general impression of things.
Yeah, well, I will say that
Yes.
I've definitely noticed a pro-Israeli tilt from the community notes. They're like definitely pro-CIA, pro-Israel. I don't know if Elon's directly involved in that. I don't want to trash talk Elon because he did let me back on Twitter.
They're
but
pro-Israel.
yeah.
They're not pro-CIA. They're pro-Israel. Like that's pretty clear.
Have you noticed that on community notes? Okay, that's interesting.
Well, it's because there's a back channel, right? There's a large back channel.
There's a whole group of these Israelis like fucking around on Wikipedia and fucking around in community notes. And they have all their fifth columnists.
Richard.
Yeah, they admit it, and they've got all their fifth columnists, like, in the United States, they're little helpers that help them and manipulate public opinion and target certain voices and neutralize them.
Like they community noted the leader of Iran, like one of his tweets, like saying that the West disrespects women and they are the true, like the Islamic world is the true respecters of women. Like that got community noted. Actually, Islamic world abuses women, blah, 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 stuff like that. So
I picked one of Zaganal's tweets that someone tried to community
let's leave it
note.
at that. Thanks for everyone who's been on here, and particularly those who have spoken. And I thought a lot of interesting ground was covered. So I appreciate it. And I will talk to you guys soon. So peace out.
Let's go.
Bye.